No, maybe actually, no, maybe you're too, like, mind-fucked to actually, like, try and listen to anything that I'm saying. So I'm gonna say it one more time, and maybe this time you can actually listen to me. So let's say if I took you and I put you in a world with completely different understandings of what masculine and feminine are, what man and woman are. They're completely switched, right? Would you still identify as a woman, even though the way that word is actually associated are completely different?
You're just getting upset that I'm not giving you the straightforward answer.
Yes, I'm very upset that you can't engage with a hypothetical that I'm presenting you. Yes, I'm very upset with that.
Here. Okay, so
yes, you just said you won't give me a straight answer to my hypothetical. That's what you just said. So, can I ask you a question? Maybe this one will go better than the last one, okay? So, how would we ever determine what someone's feelings are as they relate to, whether they relate to gender or not? How do we determine that from an outside perspective, if not from self-report?
Well, I mean, you can't do it from the outside.
Okay, so you
go by self-report. That's why.
So if they self-report, so if they're a self-report to you, so if they self-report to you that it's with gender, you would agree with me then that that is with gender.
I wouldn't.
So you just said to me, maybe I have to lay this out. So you just said to me, the question was, how do we determine whether somebody's identity is to relation of gender or the way thing that they're describing is not to relation of gender? You said there's no way to determine that besides self-report. So if they self-report to you that it is in a relation with gender, then you would have to concede to the idea that it is within relation to gender. That's literally what you just said. This follows from what you said. Okay, I think that all of you almost completely have a like, almost completely fucked view of what actually gender is. I would highly suggest that you guys actually look into what the APA defines as gender, because I feel like none of you have actually fucking read that shit, and I think that you're gonna run into a lot of different problems when you're arguing for trans identities when you think that people could just choose not to be trans. I think that is a completely terrible conscriptive statement, and if you went out against any, like, trans folk debate bro ever, they would completely call you out on that.
Good luck. Yeah. Okay, Bunk. Say who you are, what your position is, all that stuff. Introduction.
Hi, I'm Bunk. I play video games on Twitch, and sometimes I talk about politics. I guess I did, like, commentary shit, and now I'm known for debating people on different issues. I specialize in social debates, and I'm here to argue in favor of Xenogenders and Neopronouns. So, yeah.
Okay, so let's try to organize this a bit. Whoever wants to, I'm going to try to make it so when I ask you a question, try to make it one at a time. Obviously, but whoever wants to grab the mic first can grab it. How do you define gender in the first place? I think that's a good place to start.
Well, I would define gender as, I believe, typically, what is it? The APA defines gender, which is these are the identities, or the identity or expression as it relates to either male or female, or the exclusion of such, or the rejection of such, I should say.
Does anybody have any rebuttals to that?
Yeah, I would pretty much agree with that, I think.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
So I would say that that is a pretty good definition of gender. The only thing that I would add is, so as you said, it is on the basis of, so it is a social construct that comes from the basis of traits and social roles that relate to male or female. The thing that I would point out that relates to this is the construct itself does necessarily relate to biology, right? Because male and female are a bimodal thing.
Well,
right?
no, that's just, I'm sorry, that's just completely wrong, okay? So I would like to correct you on 2 grounds. So first of all, you said gender is by definition like a social construct. That is just not true. There's 2 different types of gender, or 2 different ways we kind of distinguish gender. One of them is identity, that is your relation to yourself, and the other one is expression. That's the way that you express yourself as it relates to, and it can be drawn as a relation to the constructions of, what would you call it, masculine and feminine that we see within society, or the rejection of such. If we were to say that gender is actually linked to biology and necessarily, that completely invalidates people with non-binary identities. Do you understand that?
I understand what you're saying, but all right. So, like, let me explain why I said what I said.
Sure.
A little bit more. There are certain things that we acknowledge to be true inherently that support that idea. For example, right?
Sure.
A cis man cannot be a trans man. Like, that's just true, right? Because of their assigned gender at birth.
Well,
and that
yes,
being trans isn't an identity; it's a state. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I said. Being trans is a state of being.
Well, I would say, okay, so that depends on how we define trans. What do you mean by trans? When you say somebody's trans, what does that mean?
Well, necessarily it means
No,
that you're
I was asking. No,
identifying-
I was asking the person who said like it's a state, not an identity.
Oh, sorry, yeah, me. Well, being
Sure.
trans just means that you identify with like a gender identity that is not your own, like the one that you were assigned at birth. Sorry. Like,
Sure.
So wouldn't that be an identity?
the aspect of identifying something, that's an identity, but being trans is not an identity.
But it relates to
Like,
identity. That's
It relates to an
if-
identity, but it's not an identity.
Sure.
But like everything about like an individual person is like a part of their identity, I guess, right?
Yeah.
So that would be like every characteristic, no matter what, about a person.
yeah, but it's contingent on identity.
Yeah.
Sure.
Do we have any further disagreements here?
Well, there was the thing about like gender being a social construct, and that's true. But I don't really know if that means something like in favor or in against like the point of gender being valid, because
No.
just because something is a social construct doesn't really mean that it's good or bad. It's just that
So
it's like something that we made up, like an abstraction.
So when we say gender is a social construct, normally when we're saying that, we're referring to expression, and the ways that expressions are either, what would you call it, in line with the socially constructed categories of masculine and feminine, or they reject those categories. However, the identity to oneself, we could say, is not a social construct. I don't even know how you'd argue in favor of that being a social construct.
I just don't understand what you mean by like gender isn't an identity; it's a state of being. What do you mean by like a state of being? Like, how do you?
So think of it this way. Think of it this way, right? A woman that does none of the things that a woman is specific or stereotypically supposed to do is still a woman. She is. That exists.
Yeah.
That is why. So that's why that I say gender is more of a state of being. It's not really about how you express or what you do. It is defined by the identity.
So no,
Just
okay.
because you
So
don't-
hold up. No,
Just because
this
you
is
don't conform to the traditional values of like an identity doesn't mean it's not an identity.
no. We'd agree that the identity is the thing. So actually, because
Yes.
this is so confusing to me. Some of the way that some people define like gender identity. I have no idea how you argue in favor of trans rights. So whenever somebody's transgender, why do they transition socially? Can you answer that for me?
Because in like society, you want people to like treat you as a woman, and in our current society, we have certain like roles and expectations of gender, which would be epic if they were abolished, but sadly they aren't. So, in order to like socially transition and have people understand that you're a woman, you have to conform to these certain
Right.
gender
So would you
roles.
say that there's a different that somebody could express masculinely, but they can identify femininely? For
Sure,
example.
they can do that.
Right. Would you say
Or, like,
resolving? Would you say resolving that then would be what we're trying to do? We're trying to resolve that disconnection.
Yeah, that's. I mean, yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Okay, so we're not really saying that like, oh yeah, they're not like women, or by identifying as a woman, they're expressing that way as well. There can be a disconnect between those two.
Yeah, I'm not saying that you have to like express like as femininity to be a female, but I'm saying like people socially transition because those expectations are expected of a female, and that's how people would be treated as a female in our current society.
Sure.
All right. Anyone else?
I did want to bring up my definition regarding gender, like
Yeah.
which I think is slightly different to what I've was talked about before. I've heard gender be like the way I personally describe gender would be a prescriptive, broader social role or category in society. It doesn't necessarily have to relate to sex, not always. Like we can point to third or fourth genders depending on which society you look at, India or certain Native American communities and communities over in Australia as well, Aboriginal Australians. There's been genders that are separate from a biological role, and those are still genders. Yeah, no, that's really. What
I heard Turbo groaned and displeasure. So please.
The only thing that I would really say to this is I don't disagree with you. The only thing that I say is we know on some basis it does. So like these, it is a construct, yes, but they are applied by some biological means. Now it is kind of a bullshit.
Yeah, in the modern world, yeah.
Don't get me wrong, but the point that it is applied that way means, because that is inherently how people determine what their identity is. For example, if I wasn't born the way that I was, then I don't necessarily know that I would apply the trans label myself. That means that inherently my identity was partially formed by the circumstances by which I was born. And I think that that's a very potent argument when it comes to how we're talking about how biology does, in fact, interact with your gender identity and your own sense of self.
Wait,
it
so
does interact.
Okay, so would you say
I don't think
that?
you can deny that.
No, would you say that your identity, not the part that's like, oh, I'm trans, because these things don't link, because it's more of a descriptor of the fact that what you were assigned at birth and your identity are not like inherently aligned, right? Would you say that your identity is constructed by those categories, or is it more so that your identity kind of is described by those categories?
My identity stemmed from certain realities that I was forced in. So, because you apply those labels as you learn more about yourself, as you age and as life goes on, right? Like, for example, so we can go back to me specifically, like being trans, right? Had I been born female, I would not. That's why so like back to my earlier example, it's for the same reason that a cis man cannot be a trans man. Inherently, his identity is to some degree influenced by his biology.
Not necessarily. Not so. How would you refute this idea? I say that being trans is more so a descriptor of the idea that these things don't align, rather than the descriptor of the identity itself, because the identity is completely disconnected from the expression. If we can acknowledge that, then if we don't have the ability to acknowledge that, I have no idea how we're arguing in favor of trans people.
I mean, that's true, but what I said still relates because it's not about expression, right?
No, that was completely. I have no idea why you're trying to like act like you agree with me, because that was completely like the opposite of what you just said.
Well, what I'm saying is I draw a different distinction between what you're saying is, because I don't link expression and identity. You can express.
I literally just said that I don't link those. That's what I said. But what you said was your expression, the way that expression relates to your identity is forms your identity, which I would disagree with.
I said the way biology.
Hey, really quickly, Amy, your audio is not picking up.
I'm not really. Well, I wasn't really.
That's what I said.
Okay. Go on. Sorry.
Your gender identity doesn't have to be directly. I mean, it can be influenced by your like sex or like your sex characteristics, but it doesn't have to be specifically like directly linked to your sex characteristics.
I would argue that it isn't linked necessarily at all. Like, you could have a completely different identity than what your sex characteristics are. And that difference, we more so describe that with being trans rather than that being a part of the identity itself. Because we're almost getting to like a circular reasoning where it's like, oh yeah, they're trans because they're trans. That doesn't really make sense to me.
I have a question.
Really quickly, Skipper raised. Hold on. Skipper raised a hand, and that was very polite. So go ahead.
Oh yeah. So I think that like, is my audio okay?
Yeah,
you're great. You fixed it.
It's good now.
Okay, good. So I think that like, gender identity is related to sex, but it's not quite the same thing. So like, I think that like, if I'd say like, a woman, the way that I would define that would be like, the gender and like the gender roles and identity and all that we typically ascribe to people who are born as the female sex, but like for some people that doesn't work, and those people are trans, and like then they can be like trans man or some flavor of non-binary or xenogender or whatever. So I think that like that's the difference between gender and sex. So like gender is like the social roles from sex, so it is related to sex, but it's not exactly the same thing. Well,
no, so we could say that they might have a correlation, but they are not the same, and they can be completely disconnected. We could say that most people have an identity that goes along with their sex characteristics, or the ways that society constructs the ideas of expression are through sex characteristics. But that doesn't have anything to do with identity. Identity as itself is a completely disconnected thing.
But your identity can be informed.
Not
necessarily. We're not denying that it can be
from a biological.
The fact that it can be doesn't necessitate that.
Doesn't mean it's dependent on it.
Well, I would argue that it's not really informed by it, but they just tend to correlate, or like they tend to align for most people. It isn't informed by it, because if it was but if it was informed by it, they would always align. Do you understand that?
That's not what I meant.
That's not necessarily true.
Yes, it was. No. If we no. If we were to say that identity is informed by your characteristics, therefore it would always be aligned with your characteristics, unless it is more so to itself than it's more so to itself and relates to the characteristics. Usually,
relay a disconnect, right?
Okay, really quickly, you guys. Hold on. I'm doing a 5-minute, and then we're gonna do closing statements for this part of it. So I want to get to other things. Sorry.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Minutes. Yep.
No, sorry, no. There's 5 minutes left for you to talk, and then we're gonna do.
Oh.
statements.
Okay.
So please,
I feel like
continue.
you can state and say that gender is informed by your sexuality, but that's or your sex characteristics. But that's not saying that like it is like solely informed by your sex characteristics, right? Like you can have a gender that is like gender itself. The concept of gender is more so like related to sex, like, but it's not like it has to be. Like you can have an identity unrelated to your sexual characteristics.
Well, so this is
if you can have an identity that's completely unrelated to your sexual characteristics, would you say that being trans might be almost a term that describes the relation between your expression as it relates to the world itself and your identity, or your identity and your sex? Sorry. Please don't cut me off. Please don't cut me off. More so than it is a descriptor of the identity itself, because it seems that being trans almost describes your sex as well. It's not necessarily identity.
Trans usually just refers to the fact that your gender identity isn't the same as it was when you were assigned at birth. So you can.
I would say that it's different than your sex.
Trans.
I would say that it's different than your sex.
I would disagree there, because if you had a construction that's completely unrelated to sex, which is possible, like let's say we had one that was based on astrology, which hypothetically is possible. If someone chose to transition into another gender identity, another one of the 12 in that situation, that person would be trans, but it's not related to sex. It's just they're trans.
I'm sorry, that didn't make any sense to me.
Well, gender is just.
He's talking about xenogenders. Like if you're having a zodiac sign, right? It's your gender.
If a gender just is a prescriptive like social category, that's all it is. Our current genders.
I disagree with that.
Our current genders are related to sex, but they don't have to be in any like all the time. They don't necessarily need to be. In another world, you could have a situation where gender is based on stars, for example. And someone that is transgender would be someone that transitions from the social category, the role that they prescribed at birth, to a different one, like that's usually based in another time of the year. That's how I would define transgender. Someone that just has chosen to identify as a gender identity besides the one that they were assigned at birth. It doesn't have it doesn't have anything to do with sex.
So do you think? So do you think that when somebody says I am X identity, it is them choosing the identity, or do you think it's rather them trying to express their identity or communicate their identity through the prism of language?
I think those are the same thing.
You think those are the exact same thing?
They're not the same thing.
Those are not the same thing. If you think those are the same thing, you don't understand what I said.
Well, like, you might have. I might have said something, but yeah.
So under one, we can choose what our identity is because of language. So, like, for example, I could choose that my identity is a woman. And the other one, we're just choosing which words we use to express our identity. These are two completely different things.
Sure.
Yeah. I don't think.
So which one do you think? Which one do you think is more accurate? Would you say that we're using it through the prism of language to express our identity, which is almost a
both can be true.
They both can't be
true. Yeah, I think some people might choose actively, like from the selection, or other people might have an identity and then try to find something or create one out of their feelings if they can't find one that doesn't exist.
So do you believe that people can just like choose their identity, or like choose not to be trans?
What do you mean? What? I never said trans with an identity. I said like gender. I'm referring to gender.
No, but you could change your identity to not be trans, as it would be descriptive then under that.
Right.
Well,
this is like complete.
If you identified it as your gender you were assigned at birth, then you wouldn't be trans. I'm not sure what you're saying.
I entirely reject the notion that you choose.
What do you
Turbo? Quick end. What do you reject exactly? Go on.
I entirely reject the notion that you choose your gender identity. I
Yeah.
entirely.
I mean, I think it would depend on the person. Like I think there could be someone like who's a trans woman who's like born, and then they see like women and they think, oh, I want to be like that. That is who I feel like I am, and like they didn't choose that at all. But then there could be like maybe someone who's like, I don't really care about being a man, but then I don't know, I tried being non-binary or a woman or something, and I was like, oh, I prefer this. It's like I could be a man, but I'd rather be this. So that could be a choice. So
yeah, exactly.
So do you think? So do you
I
think?
mean,
Yeah.
So do you?
If we're talking about gender dysphoria, you can like I guess gender dysphoria is like a form of like not being able to choose your gender because your body is basically rejecting the gender you were assigned at birth or the identity you were assigned at birth.
This is low-key
But like
pissing
you
me
can
off.
also be trans and not have gender dysphoria, right? Like you
Okay.
can just like,
Time is finished. So
Can I-
openings. I start opening statements, closing statements, one at a
All
time.
right, thank
please.
you. All right,
Everyone
can I go with the first closing statement? Okay, I think that all of you almost
yeah, go for
completely have a like almost completely fucked view of what actually gender is. I would highly suggest that you guys actually look into what the APA defines as gender, because I feel like none of you have actually fucking read that shit. And I think that you're gonna run into a lot of different problems when you're arguing for trans identities when you think that people could just choose not to be trans. I think that is a completely terrible conscriptive statement. And I think if you went out against any like trans folk debate bro ever, they would completely call you out on that.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Who's next?
I don't think that we. Oh yeah, you can.
Yeah.
closing
Okay,
statements.
Sebastian, go ahead.
Okay. I don't know why you think it's like why you have to be like so fucking antagonistic when we haven't even told our position, most of us. Like it's just completely unnecessary.
Because this conversation has pained me so much.
Okay.
so, like, when you can just fucking leave, I guess.
I don't
Okay.
think.
Skipper,
It's
go
like,
ahead.
okay,
Oh wait, actually, no, Sebastian. Is that just it? You just want to call
I can,
Bunk mean, or do you want to?
well, that's just like the opening of the end. But I can also say my opinion about the actual stuff you talked about now. So
Are your feelings
Actually,
okay?
I think your
I
entire
don't
closing
think that you
statement should be
can.
on my moral character. I think that'd be really interesting.
Okay, hold on, Sebastian.
it
Are you?
doesn't have anything to do with your moral character, it's just the
Hold on,
behavior.
Sebastian. Are your feelings
Yeah.
okay? Okay, please.
Yes.
Closing statements.
Well, okay. The closing statements is that I don't think you choose to be trans. I think you have a feeling of what like your gender identity should be internally, and then a trans person is simply a person who thinks that their internal feeling of gender is different from the one that they're assigned at birth. So that's kind of just my understanding of it.
Awesome, good one. All right, Skipper, go ahead.
Okay, so I think that like the can you choose to be trans debate is kind of pointless because like I think that it's like I would say that most trans people don't choose to be trans. I think most trans people most of them have dysphoria, not all of them do. Like most of them like they feel like this is not right, this is not who I am inside. But I think that like if you're just like mediocre about being a guy, but then you think, oh wait, no, I would rather be a girl. Being a guy's okay, but I would much rather be a girl. Now you could be like, I could ignore that, and it would probably be fine, mediocre. Or I could do what'll make me even happier. I would say that's a choice. It's still a good choice because you're still doing what's making you happiest. But I would say that's a choice. I think it's usually not a choice. It occasionally is. I think the whole being trans a choice debate is kind of dumb because I think it varies from person to person. But usually no, but it can be.
Okay. All right, Amy, go ahead.
I think that basing your entire opinion on gender identity solely on what was the organization that you said?
Okay, if you didn't even know what
APA.
organization I was referencing for gender, I don't think you should be speaking on it. This is like the APA is one of the most the APA is like one of the only central organizations you could ever point to for gender. Are you fucking kidding me right now?
Fucking closing statements, Amy. Please.
You said the APA, right? That's the organization that you said.
Yeah, that's the organization that we normally reference when we argue these things. Yeah.
I was just making sure. Okay, so the APA. I don't think it's very like. I don't think you should solely base your idea of gender based on just the APA or that organization.
Okay, hold on. I hate to be an asshole, but do you know what the APA is?
The APA?
Yeah, like what is the acronym?
Yeah, what does it do?
I don't know exactly what it stands for.
Okay, please don't critique. Please don't critique their credibility then. Please don't critique their credibility then when you don't even know what the acronym stands for.
If you would just let me finish talking, I would explain what I'm talking about.
Yeah, it's the American psychology.
Don't ruin it.
Okay.
Come on, you can't give him the answer. That's no fun.
I wasn't even done talking, my guy.
That's not as good of a dunk as you think it is. Anyway.
Yeah,
I think it's really funny. I think it's really, really funny. It's funny to me, and that's all it matters for.
You're so fucking stupid, bro.
No, if you critique an organization and you don't even know what it stands for, yeah, that's pretty dumb. That's pretty dumb. Yeah, no, you're making a claim to knowing what they are whenever you critique their credibility as an organization. Yes, you should know what the fucking acronym stands for, at the very least. Yes.
That's true, but just like randomly going off about people not knowing a random fact is not really a point.
It's not a random fact. It's something that you're almost claiming by critiquing an organization that you don't even know what they stand for.
He was
I'm not critiquing the organization, guy. I didn't say anything about the organization itself. I said you shouldn't base your idea of gender solely on the APA. I'm saying that you should also base it on talking to other trans people or talking to other, like, non-binary.
That's what I do.
I'm sure a lot of the trans people that I know, they would probably tell you. Wait, what were we talking?
Well, okay, those trans people that you know, I would love to have a conversation with them.
What I'm saying is that
Please,
your idea of gender is also based on what other trans people say, what other non-binary people say, and what I would assume that a lot of trans people and other non-binary people would say is that you don't have to have gender dysphoria to be trans. Like,
I never said that.
Gender dysphoria, and that can obviously influence your gender identity.
Yeah,
like, you don't want your body protecting, but also. Like, you don't have to have gender dysphoria, and you can identify however you want, whatever makes you happy, whatever makes your life, increases your quality of life, and you don't have to have gender dysphoria to do that.
I'm sorry.
The point I was trying to get to.
I really, really hate to respond to your closed statement, but I had never said at no point did I say that. At no point did I say that you needed gender dysphoria to be trans.
You were saying, like, well, I don't believe in your idea.
Can you let them finish their statement, please?
Just so they can get moving on to
all right, just come on, wrap it up. That's
sorry. All right, Amy, anything else?
No, that's it.
Okay. All right. Anna, go ahead. Give me your final thoughts on
I basically agree with Skipper. Gender has nothing. Like, gender is just something, like, you choose to be, you choose your gender. I have gender dysphoria.
Sometimes.
But I have gender dysphoria, but I chose to be a woman. I could have lived as a man and just suffered with my gender dysphoria. I chose to be a woman so that I wouldn't have to suffer.
Okay.
I separate these two things. Like, to conflate having gender dysphoria with being transgender, I don't think that's necessarily true.
Okay.
I know this
no one disagrees with you.
You said that you agreed with me. That's close to my position, but it's not exactly.
I broadly agreed with you.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah, maybe there's specific things. Yeah.
All right, Turbo, go on.
Okay, I just want to say, for one, I entirely reject the idea that you choose your gender. That's not true, because that gives fuel to the fire for conservatives to say that you can just choose to not be trans. Okay, so if you actually intend to advocate for trans rights, you have to ditch that entire thing. Number two, I did read up on the APA, the definition of gender. It is defined to relate to gender norms or roles or expectations relating to male and female. So I would argue that means that there is some sort of basis, at least in terms of how gender is distributed on a spectrum. So when it comes to the case of xenogenders, what I would say is, because it is something entirely different, it is a valid identity, but it is something separate.
Okay, so you're making a different argument, so we can get into that in the next section, because I think I don't think you've actually read, because this is a long-ass document. If you've read that entire thing in that time, I applaud you, okay? But we can talk about that document right now, because I haven't read it. I have it up, yes. Okay, you skim read it, okay. That's better than what we started with, okay? Proud of you.
Oh, I wasn't aware you were criticizing.
I'm not criticizing you.
Okay. No one. We're all friends here. It's all great. It's a hug party. Okay.
We'll hug and make up after this, okay?
All bless you. We love each other.
Okay. All right, let's. I guess because the two main things we're doing is neopronouns and xenogenders. So let's start out with neopronouns. Are they valid as pronouns, themselves, and should we use them for other people? And what limitations, if any, would you add to that? Just a general neopronoun conversation. I'll jump in if we get stuck or something happens. Go ahead.
Do I start?
Go ahead. You can start. Anyone?
All right. Yeah.
Whoever.
Sweet. So we would change our pronouns to reflect our gender identity. It's almost like shows that people kind of link this, and that xenogenders are a reflection of gender identity because people want to replace their pronouns with it, which is something that is normally referred to as gender. So I think that's a very good proof that it does relate to gender in some kind of way. It is almost the rejection of gender as we or gender as it is male and female. It's a form of non-binary identity. I don't see any problem with respecting them. I don't think we run into any contradictions logically through that.
Yeah, when it comes to neopronouns, I mean they fundamentally do inform of somebody's identity, and I would respect them in use. The only thing that I would really question is, I mean, if you think about it from a conceptual standpoint, when it comes to like language, there are some neopronouns that you're essentially creating terms and you want other people to use them. And it's like, that's fair, that's fine. But at the end of the day, I feel like we should acknowledge what it is.
Just really quickly, I want to add, just to preempt one of the arguments that might come up, please do not use any non-TOS terminology on this show. Thanks.
Yeah, don't get me banned. Just don't get me banned. Don't drop a T slur, okay? Please don't drop any gamer words.
No, hold on. No, because I know one of the arguments people bring up is like slur genders, and if we get it,
slur,
please do not actually use a slur.
Why can't I? Okay, I've yet to hear one moral or legal argument as to why I can't drop a slur right now.
My gender is very.
Okay, it's okay. This isn't a conservative panel. I don't think we have to worry about that. Oh, I don't maybe worry about me.
I'm gonna show a picture on my phone.
Well, yeah.
Okay. Well, okay. I'll
go on.
I'll give it to somebody else because I feel like the question I was gonna ask is not related to neopronouns, but perhaps.
Sure.
You'd ask it anyway. Whatever you want to ask. I mean, it's already a shit show. Go ahead.
It's not a shit show. This is glorious. This is better than you could have expected it to be. Okay, shut up.
I'm just trying to follow the rules. Oh, all right. So here's a question that I asked on Twitter: would helicopter gender be valid?
If someone legitimately identified that, yeah, why not?
Sure, I suppose.
But I mean, you don't see the problem with confirming a mean gender.
Okay.
So okay, please give me no. Stop. I'd actually like to push this question. Okay, so can you give me an argument as to why I shouldn't?
So
like, why isn't it valid?
Well, when I say valid, right?
Yeah.
As a gender identity or as an identity in and of itself?
Well, I think that these kind of relate to each other because if it's helicopter gender, you are implying... Identity... Please don't cut me off. So if you're saying it's helicopter gender, you are implying that it relates to gender. So I'm going to assume that what your question asked almost necessitates that it is involved with gender identity.
That's a good way to word it, but I would just use that phrase so we knew what it meant. But I personally wouldn't call it a gender, but that's the term.
You're saying that it's invalid, but what are you basing your invalidity of identity on?
So the reason why is, so I talked to somebody and I asked, like, are you they're not saying that they identify as helicopter. That's not what they're saying when they say helicopter gender.
Yeah.
They're saying that there are characteristics or traits or things that they think of that they associate with helicopter, and those things they identify with.
Sure.
Fundamentally, that is a different thing than what transgender means.
Well, couldn't you say the exact same? No, couldn't you say the exact same thing for, like, if somebody said, "Well, I'm a woman." Well, there's ideas that I associate with women that I associate myself with, and I would like to use that word to express my identity.
See, but that's the thing, though. I don't use roles or, like, for lack of a better way to put it, stereotypes to define my identity.
Right. So how do you define your identity?
I see your hand, Sebastian. You don't have to worry yourself out.
So I define it. I mean, like I knew I was trans simply because of the physical incongruence with my body.
Okay,
It had
so
almost nothing to do
so
with what
what
I
is your
did
identity
or what
then?
I
What is your
imagined.
identity then?
I like. Are you literally asking?
Yes, I
Transgender
am.
I'm
woman?
curious about
So you're a
Like,
transgender woman. So are you making a claim to like a physical reality when you make that claim, or are you making a claim to your identity and you're using that word to express your identity?
So just like as I mentioned before, I identify as a woman. But somebody who is helicopter gender does not identify as a helicopter. Do you see the difference? We're doing
they don't
Sebastian,
identify
really
as a
quick.
literal
No.
helicopter, but they identify as
No,
Okay,
but they're
so
using
Sebastian,
that
can I-
word. They're using
what I
that
wanna
word as a
say-
prism. No. So they're using that word as a prism to express themselves through it, almost as you would use the word woman. Just because we don't have current words within our dialect that would express it better, and they're choosing to use this word specifically, doesn't mean that they don't have that gender identity, or nor that we shouldn't respect their preferences. That's not really a good
Okay,
argument
yeah,
against
what
it.
I'm
So
saying.
I'm just
hold
gonna,
on.
make my
You're not
point.
understanding what I'm saying. We're doing different.
We're gonna pause on that one. Sebastian, you just jump in really quickly. What are you
Yeah,
gonna say?
okay, so on this topic you're talking of, I would say that the reason that something like identifying as a man or identifying as non-binary or a woman is valid, but something like a helicopter gender is not valid, is because we have these extremely long-standing cultural things that like 99% of people would agree on. These are feminine traits and these are like masculine traits. And this is why you can feel like an inclination towards one of these, and this is what gender is. However, there are other things in your identity that are not like your gender, but that you can still have an inclination towards. For example, I have the misfortune of being a League of Legends player. That doesn't mean it's part of my gender, but just like another thing. Like I wouldn't be gamer gender, I would still be just a gamer, and then a gender would be like, am I do I identify as a man? Do I identify as a non-binary? Where on this like male to female spectrum do I position myself?
So would you reject the idea of
But
like non-binary people or gender apathetic people because it doesn't actually relate to male, masculine, or feminine?
It does.
No, I
that's-
think
that's
that's
the
I
wrong
think that's
argument,
fine
'cause it-
because I
because
think
it
that's
can.
kind of like the rejection of like you being inherently like masculine
Yeah.
or feminine.
Yeah, so
would
we
say
don't
that's fine
need
because
so we don't need it doesn't necessitate that we use masculine or feminine to express our gender, right? We can express it
That's
through
what
other
it
things.
describes.
well, when you
Yeah, well,
when you
I'm
said
Well,
not
if that's
saying,
all
you
that
know,
it
like
describes,
it's
if
all
that's
just
all
like
that it
something that
describes,
society
gender
has,
apathetic
has, like,
people,
made up, basically.
literally.
But when
So
you-
I would
but-
I would
but when you said
say
that, like-
please okay.
Huh?
Think of it as
you said that, like you're saying like what's the difference between like identifying as a gamer and the concept of gender identity? Was that what you were saying?
Yeah.
Like how would
Well,
how
me
what's the
or-
difference between being a gamer and like being gamer gender, for
Yeah,
example?
so
That's-
I would
Because
say
when
so
you're
I
a
would say
gamer,
that
you are literally
linguistically
like,
so, okay,
but
no,
when
can
you're saying
I
your gender gamer gender, it's usually that you're relating your gender to like characteristics and aspects of gender or gamer, right? It's not like you're
So-
because when you're saying you're gamer gender, you're not literally saying you're gamer. Unless you are.
yeah, so okay.
Have we just completely
No,
skipped
can
the
we-
neopronouns part?
No, can we please
kind of went
actually
off
let's
of it a
actually
little
have a
bit.
no wait
Yeah.
let's actually have no because I'd really like to talk about this point. So the way that I would use as a almost a proof that this does relate to gender of some kind is that people want their pronouns to be respective. Pronouns, as we normally use them, are a reflection of gender identity, right? Whenever people use masculine or feminine pronouns or they them pronouns, it seems that it relates to gender and our comfortability with those words being used to identify us kind of relate to our own gender identity. That's the reason that people who are transgender would prefer that they have their preferred pronouns respected. We could say the exact same thing for like neopronouns, and I don't see how that would be any different. So if you were a gamer, but your gamer gender, whatever that is, preferred certain pronouns over another, I would say that would be a valid gender identity versus just being a gamer, in which most people don't actually relate to their pronouns. They don't choose their pronouns to regard with that identity.
Yeah,
So-
according to this point, like I don't have a problem with someone, you know, wanting this to be like a part of their identity. I just don't see like really the reason that you need to kind of elevate these parts of your identity to the state of like your gender, something that like has a very big, I guess, like societal implication, basically. So I don't really see like why there's like the necessity to this kind of stuff instead of just having it be a part of your identity like a lot of other things.
Well, don't you think that also, like, the entire idea of pronouns is almost a societal identity, or it's the way that society relates to that identity?
Yeah, of course, but the only reason I think
Yeah.
we have like these different pronouns is because that it's like a long-standing thing. If we were to take some hypothetical society where like we didn't have this, then it wouldn't be a problem, I think. Like if where we had different pronouns, it's not like the pronouns are inherently like set in stone by God or something.
Well, obviously they're not. So would you say that pronouns kind of relate to gender?
People can't create new ones.
Say that again. Sorry, your audio was kind of scuffed there, Amy. Go ahead, say it again.
All right, sure.
I said if the concept of pronouns are not set in stone, then why can't people just create new ones that they're comfortable with?
You can create new ones that you're comfortable with.
Yeah, that's what neopronouns are.
Neopronouns. Wait, hold on. Okay, so the thing is that the thing is that originally my objection to neopronouns, because I used to like not think it was a good thing. It was that like, well, there were two, and the first one is that like language evolves naturally, and it seemed like they were trying to force words. I've kind of come off of that mainly because it's mostly in niche spaces. So if it ever becomes mainstream, that is like a natural evolution. Like if it starts like in a small community and then it slowly, gradually becomes mainstream, that is a natural evolution of language. So I've sort of moved off of that. The other thing is that like I was thinking like it doesn't convey any information other than he, she, and they. Well, but I think the argument there would be that like if you're like outside the binary, that can be very like complex, and like the ways you think about gender can be very complex. And so if you want like a specific pronoun to express a specific gender that doesn't necessarily mean man or woman, then I can see you wanting to do that, because they is just sort of generic. It's not actually a gendered thing. So if you have a sense of gender that isn't man or woman, then I can see you wanting a different pronoun. So I'm mostly in favor of neopronouns, but they're hard to use, and
sure.
If someone has a neopronoun but they have other pronouns that they will use, I'm probably going to use the other ones just because I'm lazy and it's easier, and I don't know how to use the pronouns.
Sure.
But if they really
think
want me to,
like if someone asked me to, you talked about like the neopronouns, and then you asked me if it's okay if people come up with these things that they feel comfortable with. I would say that it's okay if you do that, but that you shouldn't kind of like try to elevate maybe someone not using them or using they them for you instead or something. Kind of elevate that to the same level of struggle as a person who's transmasculine being misgendered on purpose.
Yeah.
Because
I also want to point out that when it comes to neopronouns, so like for like the French ones, like that are literally words that were made up by one person, I would say that in those cases, it is very much kind of like a nickname in that sense, which I have no problem using. But like, if you're gonna create a term that is used to describe characteristics of yourself, I mean, is a name not as much a part of your identity as pronouns? They're comparable. So
how does that argue against neopronouns, though?
Yeah, that like argues completely in favor of them. I mean, based.
I feel like it's not even necessarily that I'm against them. I just don't see. It's not the same thing. Like
that's like a great thing. So like, what's the difference between identifying with a neopronoun and identifying with like a nickname?
Okay, see, the thing is that...
Well, I mean, if you identify with a neopronoun, so if you identify with a neopronoun, this means almost that you want that to be used in place of any other pronoun. For example, if I'm not okay with being identified as, like, he or him, but I want to be identified as, like, Z or Zer, that would be as it relates to identity rather than just a nickname, which normally people with nicknames are completely okay with being referred to as whatever pronoun they would normally use.
Yeah, but I mean, like,
that's
just
what
like...
I was going to say. Like, oh... Okay. Sorry. Do you want to go ahead or
You got it. You got this. I believe.
Okay. All right. So, thanks. So I think some people who use neopronouns use them as nicknames. Some of them don't. Like, I think this is like variable. I've seen both, but the thing is that the ones who just use it as a nickname, like the ones who use it isn't a fucking nickname. Like, no. But the ones who don't use it as like a nickname, those are usually they're more likely to have that be the one that they like strongly prefer. The ones who do use it as a nickname, they usually also have but they them. I don't care as well. So if it's a nick, that's just something I've noticed. The ones who just use it as a nickname also have like other pronouns that they're okay with. And then I don't know. That's just. Do you get what I'm saying? I don't know.
But if somebody
I have no idea what you're saying, but I agree because you sound like half British, and that's good enough.
I'm Australian.
Half British. What did I say? I'm sorry, you didn't correct me. That's just I'm right. You're wrong.
No, British and Australian accents are pretty.
They're the exact. No, they are almost the exact same. They're half British. No, they are half British. They are half British. It's like how Canadians and Americans are the exact same thing. Okay.
No, we're not.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Okay. When I say America, I do mean Canada too. They're the exact same.
Canada are like Australia and New Zealand, not Australia.
Alright,
and
this is
I don't care. I don't care. I'm erasing your culture. I am erasing your culture in this conversation.
Look, Australia is the Texas of Britain. Okay, that's my call.
Skipper,
It's supposed to be offensive. It's supposed to be offensive. Take offense.
No, it's not. There are no guns here.
Yeah.
That's fair. Okay.
You guys can't even kill yourselves efficiently. How does that feel?
Oh my.
Yeah, like whenever someone like posts that meme on Twitter with the like "you should kill yourself now" guy, I'm just like, oh fuck! If I didn't live in Australia.
If only I had a gun.
If only I could do what low tier God's telling me.
Alright. Neopronouns and Xenogenders. Go on.
If somebody solely identified with a neopronoun, would you respect those pronouns?
Depends on what it was.
Yeah. Yes, I'd probably fuck it up a few times because I don't know how to use them and it's hard to use them. But I would try my best.
Depends on what it was. That's I heard that. What's going on with that?
I mean,
which ones would you not respect and why?
Okay.
I mean, if I couldn't pronounce it, I mean.
I'd actually hold up.
Okay.
No, I'd actually agree with that. No, actually, hold up.
I'm probably not going to be able to use
Can I?
Like I've never seen that, so.
I'm being polite for once in my life and raising my hand. Please respect it, okay? Listen. All right, now, there are certain neopronouns which I wouldn't respect. For example, if they're using slurs, but I wouldn't respect them, not because it's like some deontological, like, almost rule, right? I typically assess things by their consequences. I'm a consequentialist, right? So I would assess the consequences of me using slurs tend to be a lot worse than not respecting somebody's pronouns in this scenario.
Yeah, but if I'm saying,
what if they like... Okay, hold on.
What if they really want you to, though? Will you do it then?
Well, yeah.
What if they really
you measure that?
Well, obviously, we can't measure like anything like that almost completely objectively, but we kind of have some kind of idea, some kind of intuition almost. We use like intuition pumps to kind of assess consequences oftentimes.
Yeah, but like if you say neopronouns or xenogenders,
yeah. So for example, if the slur is like cracker, all right, someone wants me to call them cracker, maybe then I'll do it, right? Because cracker doesn't really enforce a lot of different like really bad ideas. It doesn't reinforce racial hierarchies. However, if their pronouns are like the hard R, I don't know, I might be a little bit more hesitant to say that one.
Yeah, but when you would
so let me ask you this: would you be transphobic for doing that?
Yeah, I'd be based, 100%.
Can you guys hear me? Hello?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, we can hear you.
Not necessarily. No, it's not. It doesn't come from a dislike of trans people. Instead, it's like a moral, moral weighing.
Okay, so if I say that I like respect neopronouns and xenogender, and I say, oh yeah, those identities are valid, I'm not conceding that I say that all possible ideas of xenogender and neopronouns are valid. Like I wouldn't like me saying like, oh yeah, xenogender is epic. You can identify as like mushroom gender or whatever. But I wouldn't say that like, oh, that means that I am conceding that like N-word gender or like Nazi gender is like okay to identify.
Well,
like,
I would
have like the concept of xenogender doesn't mean like validating that doesn't mean that I have every possible.
But are they valid or aren't they? Are they valid or aren't they?
Well, they can't. So
no, wouldn't say Nazi gender is valid.
Can I answer the question?
Why?
Yeah.
Because you can.
Who has the question?
You can.
Somebody get a question.
No, I wanted to answer the question of are they valid. I think that they could be hypothetically valid. I don't think like many people would, or if anybody does. I think that's be incredibly rare. But I think there could be some kind of hypothetical scenario where somebody does think that is a valid part of their identity. However, my respect for them would have to be weighed morally.
Yeah, I don't think that.
So,
I wouldn't say that xenogenders are valid because we can probably deduce that if somebody identifies as Nazi gender, that identity is probably based on some other part of their identity that is based on like Nazism or something similar.
Maybe.
Okay, so
Well, let's just you can use pinpointing as like all.
Okay, we're gonna get like really into the weeds with this. So I mean, if we want to like keep talking about Nazi gender, but
We're
yeah.
discussing xenogenders. We already
the thing
like.
about the Nazis. The thing about the
Well,
Nazi
you
gender
just-
example.
Okay, hold on. Just to
Okay.
kind of get an idea, like just so I think what's being said here, or one of the ideas here, is that that an identity can be valid and also bad, or also not something that you'd want to use.
Mhm.
Is that clear? Or
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah.
Okay. That doesn't mean that your Nazi gender. I'm gonna respect your Nazi gender.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
hold
No,
on,
continue then. Hell yeah, you can. Go on, Skipper.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, see, I have a problem with this argument. So I think the thing is that the Nazi gender example or the N-word pronoun example, it is 50% of the way to a good argument. I think it says that we don't always have to respect any identity, or that like I don't think that any identity is valid. But I don't think it necessarily argues against the concept of any xenogender. Now, you said that like if someone identified as Nazi gender, that like since that identity is rooted in their Nazism, you wouldn't respect it. I don't like that argument because I think that even if like someone's like a neo-Nazi trans person, I'll still like refer to them by their pronouns, even if they're a neo-Nazi. Like I think that like saying that it's okay to not respect it because it's a Nazi, I don't like that argument. I think be that like it's not that it doesn't necessarily have anything to like Nazism doesn't actually have anything to do with gender identity. Political ideologies and gender identities.
But none of these have anything to do with gender identity. We are
So-
already bringing in things and making
Okay,
them
no,
into
so
genders
this is
by interpreting traits from those things that we relate
Okay.
within ourselves.
okay.
That's what this
Hold
all
up.
is.
Hold up. No. Okay. So the problem is, all right. So
What?
the problem is
What?
this might work through some kind of like virtue ethics idea that like I can only make one statement, right? We always ought respect xenogenders regardless of the consequences of that, right? But I could also say that maybe respecting someone's like Nazi gender would rather bring in like worse consequences than me not respecting the pronouns in that scenario. We could kind of make a moral assessment based on individual consequences of actions rather than these all-encompassing rules. I think any kind of rule-based morality is almost prompt to give us these kind of like terrible examples. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I think like it's a good point against like xenogenders basically because it feels like kind of weird that you like wouldn't respect someone's gender on the basis of it maybe being like offensive or coming from a bad place because typically for like gender this is not something that's really like debatable in any sense since it's something you identify as like self-identify as. So I feel like it's kind of getting murky and kind of points in the direction that maybe these things aren't actually
Okay,
genders,
so can you give
and
me
just
one?
other parts
So,
of your
so
identity.
okay, no, actually no, because this is a
That's
terrible
what I
argument. No, this is a terrible fucking argument. Please don't agree with this. All right, this is fucking awful. Okay, no.
You can tell me why it's terrible, please.
All right, so your argument is basically based on the idea that like because it's offensive to somebody. That's not the reason I reject it. The reason I reject it is because the consequences of like respecting that would be worse than me not respecting that given pronoun, rather than the idea that like all-encompassingly because there's certain ones which have consequences which I do not want to like agree with, right? That I wouldn't respect people's pronouns according to that. The reason that I'd argue in favor of respecting people's pronouns is actually because the consequences for society tend to be really, really good, right? The idea that we're gonna have less people like completely fucking killing themselves is a generally good like motivator to respect people's pronouns, right? This is why we derive ought statements.
It's like any.
I understand your point, but I think my point is that you're saying that it's generally a good idea to like respect someone's pronouns, right?
Well,
So
generally.
it's a good.
Generally, but I think I could come up with examples of which the consequences of not respecting the pronouns are a lot more preferable than the consequences of me respecting their pronouns in that given scenario.
I would argue that if
Skipper, hold on, hey.
okay,
Skipper, please tell us why the argument is bad, or why you think it's bad. Sorry.
Or because you're saying that like you wouldn't respect like Nazi gender because of the consequences of its actions, but if you don't like if you misgender like a like some other trans person that could result in killing themselves. I have a few problems with this. First of all,
that's not the actual argument, but sure, continue.
Wait, okay, what did I get wrong?
So I said that almost all of my actions are based on consequences of those actions. Are you like a consequence? What's the like normative framework if we really want to get into like very specific ethics?
I don't know. I used to be a utilitarian, but the more I think about utilitarianism, the more I kind of think it's shit. So I'm not sure at the moment.
Right. So a normative framework is something that we use to base off what we ought to do. So any ought action that I derive, like I ought respect somebody's pronouns in this scenario, is going to be derived from my normative framework. If my normative framework is I want the best consequences for actions, I'm a form of consequentialism because I don't want to get into like deep normative frameworks and explaining egoism, right? If that's my very basic moral framework, and that's one thing that I would use to motivate me, for example, to get a more inclusive society, a society that is better for more people, right? If that's that's the basis that I derive my ought statements from, and one of these ought statements, if I do it, will actually result in bad consequences, that is a good reason not to do that ought statement.
Well, when you say like you kind of say this thing that there are consequences to maybe accepting someone's pronouns.
In certain situations, yes, in certain situations there are. For example, accepting somebody's pronouns when they are the hard R N word would reinforce a racial hierarchy. Would you not agree with me on that?
Yes, I would agree with you on that.
Okay, so you agree. So you agree with me that sometimes there are bad consequences to reinforcing people's pronouns.
So
yes, what do you disagree with me on?
Okay. Well, I disagree with you. I'm not sure if that's always okay. Okay, listen. So if you're publicly like supporting Nazi genders, okay, sure, that could maybe encourage people to identify as Nazis. But if this is like someone who like you know in person, not on Twitter, who you know them in person, you're in private, and they identify as a Nazi gender.
Well then, sure, I would respect that.
Why not? Disrespecting that Well, wait, no, I thought you said that, like, disrespecting Nazi genders.
Normally, so I would distinguish between the consequences of different actions. The consequences would be different in this scenario, so therefore I would respect it. But I do think there are certain situations where I wouldn't respect certain genders. For example, if we're in public and someone wants me to, like, call them a hard R.
Okay, but here's the thing that I would say about Nazi genders.
Because we're not arguing about the ethics.
Hello, okay, so somebody said, okay, Turbo and then Amy. Turbo, go first.
Oh, God.
So what I want to know is this, right? Why is identifying as a Nazi gender, if you believe that that's a part of your identity, why does that necessarily have to be a gender? Why?
Well, if they're using it to replace, their pronouns. Okay, never mind. You don't want my answer for it.
So I feel like me and Bunk.
Wait. I'm not done.
Okay, buddy.
This can be expanded though, like necessarily. How do you determine what parts of identity that you identify with are a gender or not?
Sure. So the way that I would determine that things are part of a gender identity are one, self-reporting of something. For example, people tend to self-report a lot of things about their gender. That's the only really way we can know identity. And then furthermore, I can almost base that off of the ways that it encapsulates how they like to be called. For example, we normally use pronouns to encapsulate gender. So if somebody's identity kind of goes into the realm of pronouns, I would say they would probably be linked to gender.
But
hold on, that doesn't answer the question.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does. The fuck?
You really just said pronouns and identity, right?
Pronouns are typically a reflection of identity. The pronouns that people prefer to be called are typically a reflection of their identity, yes.
Amy, what'd you say? Sorry. Hold on.
Okay, but what I wanted to say before is that gender is like any other form of like identity, like at all. Like you can, like when I say that I don't respect, like Nazi gender is technically a gender, like it's an identity that you can have, but I don't have to respect it. Just in the same way as someone can identify as a Nazi or identify as a racist, but I don't have to respect that identity of theirs. I don't have to be like, you're a Nazi, that's super valid. Okay, you know?
What is the difference?
The problem here is that being a Nazi is not a gender.
Right. What is the difference between Nazi gender and somebody who just was a Nazi? What is the difference?
Probably their encapsulation of pronouns, right? So if somebody reports that they're Nazi gender, that has a
wait. So that's literally it. You could take
that would be a good
and attribute pronouns to it, and it would become a gender.
Well, yeah, that's typically a good report of like where people are from, right? So if somebody says I identify as X gender, that's a really good basis for tracking that they are said gender. Yes. Well, how else would we determine it? Do you want the gender police coming? Do you want no? How else would we determine it? You want the gender police knocking on people's doors, like doing a brain scan on them?
Okay.
No,
I feel like
being a Nazi would not be something that you would be able to tell by scanning somebody's brain. You wouldn't be able to tell that.
Well, let's say we develop let's say in a hypothetical world we develop technology to that degree, right? And it says on this brain scan that they should be a different gender. Should we start to validate people's genders by that, or do you think it'd be a better tracker to work on self-report?
I mean,
Okay.
if that were literally
Because you're getting
possible,
really close to transmedicalism. You're getting really fucking close to transmedicalism right now, buddy.
Somebody, I just don't
Hold
think
on.
somebody would genuinely.
kinda, yeah.
Hold on, just really quickly, just like to get Bunk's idea here. So, like, imagine you could like take a device, put it to somebody's head, and it would say like, whatever
Probably,
pronouns should
yeah,
be
probably
used
what
for them
pronouns should be used, yeah.
objectively.
Well,
Yeah,
it's not
is that
objectively.
good?
I'm saying probably. So, like, let's say, actually, I'm
Probably,
gonna
okay.
develop this hypothetical for you guys. Okay, so let's say we get into a world where we have some kind of medical research into the idea of what people should identify with. So, like, we can put it in a brain scanner of some kind, right? We can do some kind of test, some diagnostic to understand that somebody probably identifies as X or Y, right? And then also we have them come out and say, well, actually, I identify as Z, right? Should we call them by Z, or do you think we should call them by X and Y? Do you want like the gender police knocking on your fucking door?
I mean, it's a kind of a weird hypothetical, but if you had a machine that could literally prove somebody's gender,
I just said it didn't prove it. I
Kinda,
just said
yeah.
no. I just said it didn't prove it. You clearly aren't fucking listening to me because I just made it very
But, like,
clear
what the
that
fuck
it
is that?
probably it could tell you probably
why
what somebody
would we use a
identifies with.
machine that has no. This is it's
So it's
pointless. Come
almost
on.
like it's almost like you agree with me. So it's almost like you agree with me. If we also have 100% determination of whether somebody's gender is X or Y, right? You should go by self-report. This seems to be a better tracker, a better truth. No, stop! Don't cut me off! Don't fucking cut me off! Holy shit! If you want to get into the argument, if you want to get into the weeds of the argument, I want to get into the weeds of the argument. Okay? So if you actually want to get down, want to drill down all the very fundamental basics of how we divide gender, then I want to go down there. No, stop fucking cutting me off! Holy shit! Shut
Can you
the fuck
clarify
up!
the analogy, please, because it makes no fucking sense.
Okay, what?
How does this not make sense to you? So the hypothetical is supposed to determine.
If you had a hypothetical machine that could scan someone's brain.
Okay,
and tell them
actually,
what gender they
just
are,
stop
wouldn't
talking.
it
Just stop
necessarily
talking
be
for
the
10
gender
seconds.
That they think they are.
That's not what I said. So if you actually listen
How
to me,
else would this work?
so if you actually listen to me for like
Yeah, why
0.2
just makes
seconds
no
instead of
fucking
trying to.
sense.
No, almost everyone else, I guarantee. No, almost everyone else kind of understood what I was saying. So this machine could normally, or this process could normally tell us, like, let's say with a 70% accuracy, that what someone's gender identity is. Do you think it would be a better truth tracker to use that machine or somebody's self-report as to their gender identity?
I think it would. If you had a machine that could scan someone's brain and say, okay, they have this gender because of something we scanned in their brain, wouldn't that necessarily be the
Hold on.
gender? That,
No, I just said it had-
gender. It's not 100%.
Yeah, I literally just said this. I've said this multiple different times.
yeah, I know. Okay.
Then why
I
don't
know,
you
so
get
they
it?
might,
Hold on.
they might
Wait,
have this gender.
personality doesn't make
It's
sense
like
though.
a herpes test, but for gender.
Yeah, it's like a herpes test for gender. Yeah.
Construct, and you couldn't tell by scanning somebody's brain anyway. This
Well-
doesn't make any sense.
No. Okay. So if we
It's
accept.
hypothetical.
Oh my
You're
god.
gonna
Oh
have
my
to-
god.
we're
Do you
gonna
not
have
understand?
to-
Okay.
We're
Okay.
gonna
Hold
have
up.
to engage
No,
in
hold up.
hypotheticals here.
Hold up. I'm gonna have to. I'm sorry. I forgot that we're working with like 20% of our brain right now. Okay. So give me 1 second. I'm gonna try and explain this to you. So typically people, if we had medical research, unless you believe in some kind of non-materialism, we have medical research that would be so advanced to the point where we could determine somebody's preferences. Then yes, we could have kind of determined how that relates to social constructs and the way that they
If you
properly
could
identify.
someone's
Yes.
preferences, that would be the same as self-ID.
Other people can interpret them differently. You understand that, right?
What do you mean other people can interpret them differently? What do you mean by that?
So, for example, you're talking about a machine that has an idea of 70% chance of determining what somebody's identity is.
Sure.
That information that machine has, it can be interpreted different ways, and that identity can be drawn up to any.
Sure, that
This is what I
doesn't
mean.
refute literally anything that I said. No, you don't think that doesn't refute literally anything that I said. Every single bit of medical science is almost somewhat determined in like the what would you call it? The ability to perceive results of different things. Please stop trying to talk over me, okay? Every single machine, every single basis of science. No, because everyone's attacking me. I'm trying to explain this to you, but it's really fucking hard because it feels like I'm working with a kindergartner right now. It really feels like I'm working with a kindergartner right now. I don't have the crayons to explain to you on hand, so I'm trying to talk with my hands.
Oh my god.
It's not impossible if you actually try for like 10 seconds to engage with a hypothetical. I know it's really hard for some people to engage with hypotheticals, but I'm really asking you to work with me right now. So, okay.
Aren't you a joy to talk to?
Oh yeah, no, I'm very pleasant to talk to. You know, I'm a lot more pleasant to talk to than people who can't fucking understand basic hypotheticals, okay? I guarantee it. So actually, no, shut the fuck up. Oh my god.
Premise of it makes any fucking sense.
No, if we could understand, if we could some way determine the majority of times what people would identify with, would you think it would be better to use that or self-report? Which one do you think would probably be a better way to determining this gender identity?
Okay, Okay, I think the thing I can't kind of understand about the hypothetical is if you scan someone's brain and you get this percentage that there's something the machine tells them, right? That's one part of it. And then there's the part that they say themselves that they are, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have these two conflicting information in some cases.
Yeah, let's say they conflict. Which one ought we prefer?
You're asking which one we should basically
which one ought we prefer?
use for them.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we should prefer the one that they themselves identify with.
Yes. Great. All right, that's fantastic. Okay, that's fantastic. Now that we've determined that self-report is probably going to be the best way of identifying people's what people's genders are, don't you think it would probably be better to go along with self-report in other situations as well? Or are you going to try and default back like to some kind of idea that we can determine out from an outside perspective what people's gender identities are, even without the technology development that we had in that hypothetical?
Yeah. Well, of course, you can.
If you can somehow find a way to objectively determine that somebody's gender identity is genuine, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, but the problem is we don't even have that right now. The problem is we don't even have that right now, if that even is possible. And in addition to that, even with the hypothetical scenario that I gave you, where you did have that technology, you seem to also prefer self-report. I agree with that. That's a great answer, though, hypothetical. That's what I normally expect.
You did not present us with a concrete way of proving it. It's a 70% chance.
Well, 70% chance is 70% chance is some kind of way. Well, let's actually put it at 99.9% chance. Would you still prefer that over what somebody's self-report is?
Right, this is what frustrates me about.
Actually, I have a really good hypothetical for you. Let's say somebody's identified as male at birth. No, let's say somebody identified as male at birth, right? They have the sex organs of what we typically associate with a male. And actually, this report tells us they probably identify as a woman, right? But they actually identify as non-binary. Which one should we call them by? Should we call them by they, them, or she, her?
I would argue that wouldn't happen.
Okay, so you're just not going to engage with the hypothetical. That's great. That's great. We're not going to engage with the hypothetical. All right, I don't give a damn about your opinion then. All right, you can't even engage with my hypothetical.
I'll engage with it.
Please, thank you.
Using the premises that you set up,
everyone makes when discussing self-ID. Okay, so here's the thing.
They got it wrong that it's not guaranteed. Your own premises don't work in this analysis.
I never said it was guaranteed. That's the important part of it. I never said it was guaranteed. I've been very, very, very clear, almost crystal clear with you that is not the hypothetical. And you're so insistent because you want it to be that so you can get some kind of cheap own on me. Oh yeah, well, it's not guaranteed in your hypothetical. Shut the fuck. Yes, it's not guaranteed. Yes, it's not guaranteed. That's what I said. So stop saying that it's not guaranteed. Okay? We agree with this. No, it's not. By definition, that's not guaranteed. But I understand that it's really, really hard for a kindergarten to understand these kinds of the concepts. So we can just fucking move on if you really want to.
Hold on, Skipper. Hold on. It's very entertaining. Thank you so much. Skipper, please.
Please, Skipper. Please, Skipper. This is the one time I want to hear an Australians talk. Okay.
Okay. All right. So this is the problem with a lot of this is the problem with a lot of people like arguing about self-ID, and that's that what is a woman? And how do we tell who is a woman? Similar questions, but they're slightly different. How do we tell what is a woman? I think self-ID is the best way of doing it, but that doesn't necessarily mean a woman. That's how we define woman. So we can say woman is So I think the problem is that a lot of people will say, "Oh, self-ID is a bad definition." But it's well, no, that's the best way of determining it. But I think so self-ID is the best way of determining someone's gender, but it's not a good definition for what gender actually is.
Well, but for determining somebody's gender, that is a pretty... So if somebody says that my gender is X, then we can kind of take their word for that. That's what I would say.
Bug, can I ask you a clarifying question? Hey, hold on.
Okay.
I have a clarifying question. Do you believe that somebody could be wrong about being trans or being a certain gender, and is there a way for somebody else to tell that? Is that possible?
I think... it's possible for someone to be wrong. I don't know if it's possible for someone else to be able to tell. I think if someone's I don't know, the egg who's lying to themselves, I think that's possible. I don't think, but I get annoyed when other people are pointing fingers and saying you're an egg, because it's no, you don't know them. They have a better understanding of their experience. Maybe it's not perfect. Maybe they're working through some shit.
Yeah.
But you can be wrong, but I don't think other people will have a better idea.
Yeah, sure.
I'd
agree with you. Yeah. That's what I'm trying to get to.
How gender works.
Okay, buddy.
Someone identifying as the gender that they are assigned at birth doesn't they may have gender dysphoria, but they're still that gender at birth. They aren't necessarily wrong. I think that's an invalid question almost. If they identify as trans at some point later on, then from there, yes, they're that new gender identity.
I suppose.
Well, I
somebody
don't
could
think.
have, like,
Okay, so I don't think.
Like,
I almost agree with you descriptively. I just don't agree with like the reason why that is. So I would say that they would probably always have that identity, but we can only base what we understand as their identity off of what they say. So if that information changes, what we ought to believe would change as well.
That identity is a social construct. In another society, that idea wouldn't even exist, so they couldn't even have been that thing all along. That by virtue of them coming to identify as that thing, they become that thing.
See,
okay,
that's what I don't like.
Yeah, no,
Like,
I
just
fully reject that. I fully reject the idea that people can choose to be trans, and I think that my descriptor would be a lot
really
better.
quickly, so like,
hold on. The choice debate is fucking cancer.
Yeah.
Hold on. Does an infant have a gender? I guess is maybe a question.
Does an infant have a
That's actually-
gender?
That's actually
Not necessarily.
Well,
I mean, maybe.
okay, hold on. I think I have a good. I think I have a good answer to this. So I think that they could have a gender, but I don't think that we have reason to believe that they have a gender at that point. So it's almost like certain things kind of develop throughout life. For example, a sense of identity, self-awareness, right? Certain things will develop throughout life, right? We don't have reason to believe it, for example, at conception, but we have reason to believe it later on. But we can understand that reason belief. If there's reason for, or there isn't reason for belief at A, and there's reason for belief at B, then there must at some point develop reason for belief that they do have gender.
Well, when you say
think an
gender,
infant
do you
can-
mean gender as...
I would agree.
Yeah. When you say gender, do you mean gender as in like a prescriptive social role? Like, are we?
I don't think
like, treating
gender-
them in a specific way, or are we saying? Do
So
they have a
I mean
specific
gender. I
identity?
mean gender as in a descriptive of the identity that somebody has.
So their gender identity, yeah, yeah. I don't think necessarily an infant has a gender identity. Perhaps, but I don't think.
Perhaps, but I don't think we have reason to believe that. Is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, exactly.
You can.
I'd agree.
I mean, an infant can identify with a gender, but I personally don't think.
I don't
that
think
an infant
that
would
they-
have the
I don't think an
capacity.
infant can identify with a gender. They can't even. They don't even understand like words. How the fuck are they going to understand
Yeah.
gender? Like I think
Yeah.
you have to be like at least like a younger kid to.
Hold on,
have,
hang on,
like,
Skipper. I'm gonna push back
Yeah.
a little bit because we understand that like nobody fucking understands what gender is apparently. So are infants any less capable than like the average person?
Well, apparently gender
Yeah,
is
'cause
just
people
whatever I
have
want it
very
to be now.
fuzzy
So
ideas. Infants don't even have that fucking fuzzy idea because infants don't understand anything. They don't have like people
Mhm.
have fuzzy and inconsistent ideas about gender, but those are still ideas. Infants don't even have that. So yeah,
Okay.
yes.
Buddy.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
I'd agree with that. Yeah.
Wow.
I think that's
Okay.
agreeable. Yeah.
Where did this argument go now?
Shit, everyone agreed. I guess we're we
Yeah.
cleared it
does
up.
everyone agree? Do we finally agree on something? Holy shit! Holy shit! We've come so far. We've come so far. All right, I'm so happy with the way this is going.
The only,
We agree.
the only question that I would still ask is like if there are like random elements,
Mhm.
like for example, with the idea of like deer, right?
Mhm.
How does identifying as that make it valid, and why?
What now?
Okay. Well,
I'm sorry. Can you repeat that?
Wait. See,
Wait.
no, I don't like that because
Uh,
why
I'm-
not doesn't answer the question.
Wait, I'm sorry. Hold up. I'm sorry. Can you repeat that? I kind of almost tuned that out.
Of course he did. Oh,
Of course
Why
he
does
did. Shut the fuck up, okay? Every single time you try and make something, it hurts me more and more. Please shut the fuck up, okay?
oh. I'm so sorry. It hurts your ears. Anyways.
Yeah, your
point
voice
that I'm
is
making
very fucking annoying, and that's saying something when I'm the one saying that, okay? I barely can say my own voice, let alone yours. Shut the fuck up. God damn. Please don't try and like be this tough person on the fucking panel, alright? You've been the dumbest person this entire time. It's like walking through an infant through like very basic concepts when I'm talking to you. Please don't try and come off as like this snarky, narcissistic person.
Yeah,
What
you're
now?
the only one trying to act tough. Yeah.
So is that your
Yeah, I'm
response?
sorry. Like, Bunk, I agree with you more, but come on, you're being the bigger asshole.
Well, I'm being the bigger asshole, but at least I have some kind of precedent or like some kind of grounds to be an asshole about this. This is what I'm trying to say.
Not really.
Well, being the fact that I've had to work you through every single concept that we've had on this panel, yes.
You didn't
What's your
have to do
ground
that.
of
You
the-
chose
Yeah, I did it out of the charity of my own heart. Yes, you're welcome.
you chose to do it.
Yeah, I
chose.
did. Yeah, I should get
Oh, right.
getting paid for this shit. Yeah, I should have charged you something for it.
Yeah, sure.
All right.
I was drawing a blank.
Please continue.
What are we continuing? What is there to say?
So,
But
it-
there was a hypothetical about like
Anyone got?
The dear gender thing.
Okay, I remember what it was. All right,
Dear gender, yeah. What's going on with that? Please describe this.
So it's like my issue that I take with concepts such as these is why does that become valid because somebody? Why?
Hold on, can I ask a question really quickly?
Mm-hmm.
When y'all are saying valid, do you mean like something that we should respect, or like literally follows from the premises? How are you defining the word valid there?
Well, I'm saying, is this literally as valid as being a trans man, being a trans?
I feel like that didn't answer my question.
Well, as valid is, in my opinion, a complete contradiction. Valid is just a true or false. Valid is what follows from premises in an argument. An argument is valid whenever it follows from certain premises.
You're using valid
as valid,
Yes.
yeah. Unless you're using valid to be something completely fucking different that has like a gradient, then I have no idea how to answer the question.
No.
There is a difference between someone.
True and false isn't always a binary, because something.
Well, valid normally is a binary. It's almost as if there's something logically follow, yes or no.
I
Is
don't
kind of
know
the.
if it is a binary.
Yeah,
I have to think about that.
Normally valid
like,
is a binary. Okay, I don't know how much like experience you guys have like in formal logic, but valid is normally a binary.
Normally, yes, you can have like Boolean logic, for example, but for the most part, yeah, it's
a binary. Yeah.
Sure.
I would think that but something can be like valid, but not necessarily be, I don't know, like true in a sense. If for example, like someone's feelings will always inherently be like valid because it's how they feel and only they know that. But the things they're feeling may not necessarily be like logical to other people in any way, right?
Well, okay, so valid in this
different ways.
context, I would say that it is not a descriptor. Whenever somebody like expresses their feelings, it's not a descriptor of reality, but more so a descriptor of how they feel. And if how they feel is actually aligned, like it's aligned, I think that's valid as the way that you try and use that word. Like even if their feelings aren't a descriptor of reality, they can still be valid as in that's the actual descriptor of their feelings.
Okay, just really hold on really quickly, just so we're all clear. Is everyone aware of the difference between a sound argument and a valid argument?
Yeah, I'm very aware of that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Continue.
Well, who is speaking?
Oh.
You can have an argument that makes sense, and it can also be a shitty argument.
Well, you can also set something up in like a correct way, but the argument can still not make like any sense.
Yeah,
like it can have a correct form, but
terrible at conveying.
Yeah.
The point that I'm getting at is.
Thank you.
So okay, can I? So we all understand the difference between sound and valid arguments, right? We're there.
Yeah. So you can go back. Yeah.
All right.
Continue on with what
All
you're
right.
doing.
Fantastic.
So I mean, like, why is somebody identifying as something enough to make it valid? It is true.
Well,
right?
because
this is gender.
Right?
Like,
well,
I think generally because that's the best way to determine.
Yeah.
Like because you can't open up someone's brain and determine like what's inside. So I think the best measure we have is what they're telling you.
Well, even if we get into transmedicalism, I would say that, like, for example, I'm very pro, like, if we can use research to try and determine, like, whether somebody might be, like, for example, transgender or not. We do this, like, with children. We have them, like, see a psychologist, and they'll kind of report that back to us in multiple years, right? But I think that it's always better to prefer self-report rather than any kind of thing that we can determine medically. I think that is always going to be preferable.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
In the example you had, even if you had 100% brain scan that would like say what their objectively true gender, even though I don't even know what that would like be, then I would still think that you should respect like what they say they are instead of the machine.
Yeah.
The question that I'm getting at is more of the like theory approach, right? Like, what makes this identity valid in the same context, such that it is. So, like, it would be transphobic to deny them this. Like, what
makes it not valid?
What makes these things the same thing, more or less?
Okay.
Well, they both kind of. Okay. Never actually, Skipper, you go. I'm kind of sick of talking to this person.
Okay, so I think that like you're saying like what makes it transphobic. I don't think that like someone who doesn't understand xenogenders or whatever is the same as a rabid transphobe. Like I don't think that those are the same thing. I think that like what makes it valid is from what I understand, it seems like xenogenders are mostly people like using metaphors to like try and describe their identity. I don't personally get it, but like I can like logic myself into understanding it. I don't like intuitively get it at all, but like I think I will respect it because like but I think it's like if someone is using metaphors, because the thing is that if you like exist outside the binary, like that, like there's like a lot of different types of identities.
Ooh.
I think that you could, because then I don't. Fuck! I should have thought this through before I started speaking.
Okay, no, what was the question again? I'm sorry. Skipper just
I feel
mind
you.
fucked me so hard with that response that I forgot the question.
You got stun locked.
Like that.
Basically, what I'm asking is what makes identifying. All right, so I'm gonna go through what I think.
Mhm.
Somebody who identifies as a Neogender is doing, and then we can like compare them. Okay, so if they're like taking a term, right? Like for example, like dear gender, and they identify with associations in other kinds of traits that they identify with. How is that the same thing as literally identifying as something? Why are these the same?
Well, they both kind of.
It's not the same as identifying as a woman. It's like a categorically different thing, but that doesn't mean that there's anything.
It could be similar to identifying as non-binary, right? It's a descriptor of your current gender identity in the same way that it could be a descriptor of your current gender identity to espout that you are a woman. Does that answer your question?
But it's doing something fundamentally different.
How is it fundamentally different? What's the fundamental difference between these two?
Because I am saying that I am this thing, right? I identify as this.
So I am saying
that.
Okay.
Saying that you're a woman is just you. Saying that you're a woman is just you like identifying your relationship with gender.
Yeah.
And
no, hold on.
And then
She's saying that she literally identifies as a woman, whereas people who use xenogenders are sort of using metaphors. I kind of agree with that, but that doesn't mean
so I would reject. So unless you believe that the categories of man and woman are like so set in stone that these couldn't change, I would say that it's actually more so you're using it as a prism to describe your identity. In the same way that I could use, for example, the words gender apathetic to describe my identity. The way that those words might change, and if, for example, there might be different cultural associations around those words that might make me choose to use different words to describe my identity. The identity wouldn't have changed, rather the cultural ideas around those certain words would have changed.
Yeah, so like what's the what do you mean like literally a woman? Like what like is a woman an object? Like is it a specific thing that you can just be?
I mean, a woman exists, right? Like man and woman are genders that exist.
What do you mean by
independently? They exist independently.
But very generally accepted by the public, I would guess.
You just cut me off every time I speak. They exist independently of what they do, dress, or act like. So you can say like, "Oh, you're not feminine," still be a woman. You can say, "Oh, you're not masculine." It's like still a man. So the point that I'm getting at is somebody who identified as dear gender that has none of the traits that describe that gender, then they definitively are not that thing. So by virtue of that alone, we're doing two different things.
Sounds like you contradicted yourself. Hold on.
You just
we're describing two different things. I'm describing two different things. That's why it sounds like a contradiction.
Because you just said that like people can identify as women, but not like live up to the expectations and gender roles of a woman. But then you went on to say
they would still be a woman.
Valid because they don't live up to the expectations of a deer. It's like
no. What I'm saying is they are not that thing when they do not have any of the traits of that thing because they do not identify as that thing. They're using the traits to describe what their identity is. They're doing something entirely different.
Okay, but what's wrong with that?
Well, I mean, it's not that it's wrong.
Wait.
The point that I'm getting at is that is something fundamentally in a different category.
Wait, so let's say hold up. Let's say I hypothetically put you in a world.
It's valid in its own way.
Hold up. Let's say I hypothetically put you in a world where the categories of man and woman, what is masculine and feminine, is completely switched, right? So your identity would align more with a man than with a woman, like the kind of underlying descriptors of it. Would you still use the word woman to describe your identity, or would you change that to be man?
Yep.
It has your identity. You'd still use that. Regardless of the actual, what the word means. Okay, never mind. Okay, never mind. You don't understand how language works. Okay, that's a really good place to start. So language.
Shut up. No. I don't base my gender identity off of traits and stereotypes. That's the difference. I'm not using a metaphor to describe
So
my
you
identity.
don't. So
That's
if I
not
were to
what I
put
do.
you in, no. So what I
Okay,
asked
that's-
you, no, maybe actually, no, maybe you're too like mind fucked to actually like try and listen to anything that I'm saying. So I'm gonna say it one more time, and maybe this time you can actually listen to me. So let's say if I took you and I put you in a world with completely different understandings of what masculine and feminine are, what man and woman are, they're completely switched, right? Would you still identify as a woman, even though the way that word is actually associated are completely different?
Like,
Well,
I
I
would be
mean,
a
I'd
woman
have
in
to
that
know
world,
what
sure
that-
as fuck.
I'd have to know what that understanding is.
It's completely switched. I just gave you the best descriptor they could possibly have of that.
Turbo,
So
Same as
then
now, but flipped.
well, look,
Turbo,
well, I
why are
mean,
you?
become-
Why do you identify as a
Oh.
woman?
because
makes
of
you a
gender dysphoria,
Okay,
right?
but okay, so people have
Right?
to have gender dysphoria to identify as a gender.
I would say no, but I would say that when
Okay,
you're looking
so
at
then what
things
makes
that
you a-
are
what makes you a
decidedly
woman?
That's not what I asked. Okay, so, man, I don't know. I'm really trying hard, and it's quite difficult to explain this. It's almost as though I'm, again, working with a kindergartner right now. So if I were to take you, and the words masculine, feminine, man, and woman, the ideas and understandings and the concepts associated with those were completely switched, I think most people would be much more comfortable identifying with the one that actually has those underlying properties rather than the word itself, because words themselves are not actually like descriptors. Definitions are not found, but created.
Right.
Yes.
So my answer to your hypothetical is I would have to actually look at it. Right. Like,
So
I
just gave you a full understanding. If you actually listen to my words, I give you a full understanding of that. So, okay.
You're just getting upset that I'm not giving you the straightforward answer.
Yes, I'm very upset that you can't engage with a hypothetical that I'm presenting you. Yes, I'm very upset with that.
Okay, so
Not what's happening here.
Yes, you just said you won't give me a straight answer to my hypothetical. That's what you just said.
Right, because you're saying interact. I am interacting with it. I'm
No.
just not answering it in the way that you
No,
want.
you're not answering it at all, actually.
Okay,
Okay,
so
Super and then Sebastian.
I long gave him an answer.
What was your answer? I'm sorry, can you run the answer by me one more time?
Sebastian, guys.
Turbo.
Yeah.
Turbo.
Yes.
Okay, fine, go
So
ahead.
you-
Just Turbo, just go ahead. Let's go on.
So you say that somebody doesn't have to have gender dysphoria to identify as a woman, right?
Right.
So if somebody doesn't have gender dysphoria but they identify as a woman, what makes them a woman?
Yeah, this person just will not engage with the hypothetical. There's literally nothing that I could actually say.
Ask them that.
okay,
Okay.
So
but what
the
if a
thing
dear
is-
what if a dear gender person said they're a dear gender because such and such? Would you validate that?
Like, I've given them literally every single thing to
if
work
they
with, and
wanna
they just
be
won't
called
answer it,
certain
so...
things, I could call them those things.
Okay.
I could
So
do
what's your
that.
Yeah, but would you
so what's your
validate the gender?
you know,
So look, my position has always been that I would respect them, but at the same time, I would still think like this is entirely different.
okay, so you think it's
Their
about human
identity would-
decency, but you don't agree with it conceptually? Is that what you're saying? I'm trying to get your position.
I mean,
You
that would be
tolerate
one
it?
way to phrase. That would be one way to phrase it, but what I would say is I think that their identity is different, and I should respect that, right? Like that's
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
if you respect
Oh.
so if you respect
So-
xenogender and
to
you
keep
agree
it
that they're
real simple, I don't think it's a gender thing. I think it's an identity thing that should be respected. To keep it real.
So,
but they
Okay.
relate that to their gender. Like they relate dear
Mm-hmm.
gender to their relationship with gender.
Yeah. And that's
okay,
why
so
I'm
how would
not
I...
gonna
So, can I
invalidate it.
ask
But
you a question?
fundamentally disagree.
So, can I ask you a question? Maybe this one will go better than the last one, okay? So, how would we ever determine what someone's feelings are as they relate to... whether they relate to gender or not? How do we determine that from an outside perspective, if not from self-report?
Well, I mean, you can't do it from the outside. You
Okay,
have
so
to
you...
go by self-report. That's why I
So
said
if
that
they
I would use what
self-report...
want
So if they were
call it,
self-report to
because I
you...
can't know that.
So if they self-report to you that it's with gender, you would agree with me then that that is with gender.
I wouldn't, because I
you
don't
just-
think of gender in that sense.
So you just said to me, maybe I have to lay this out. So you just said to me, the question was, how do we determine whether somebody's identity is to relation of gender or the way thing that they're describing is not to relation of gender? You said there's no way to determine that besides self-report. So if they self-report to you that it is in a relation with gender, then you would have to concede to the idea that it is within relation to gender. That's literally what you just said. This follows from what you said.
What I'm saying is I would respect that they believe that it is, but I don't think of gender to be in that.
So
Okay.
how
I
do
don't
we
know how
determine
that's
that?
not obvious.
How do we
I
determine
don't
that?
know
How do we
that's not
determine that, though? That's what I'm asking you. Because we're talking about their own relation, their own identity. You can't extract that from them and determine through some kind of like crystal ball magic bullshit to understand and then use that to evaluate for yourself as that relates to gender or not.
How are you missing what I'm saying here?
I'm not. I'm engaging with every single thing that you're saying. If what you're saying is digging you into a hole, that's your fault, not mine.
Maybe I'm not wording it right.
Yeah, you're clearly not.
I think what so hold on really quickly. So Turbo, what you're saying is that
I'm getting
hold on, that xenogenders just categorically aren't gender no matter what. Is that kind of what you're getting at? Like they can't be, just by definition, or what?
Who are you asking?
Sorry, no, Turbo. So
right,
Turbo
like,
is
I
what?
don't view
Yeah,
them
what do you?
the same as binary genders.
So do you have a xenogender to like be able to view that with, or do you just like are you just presuming that through no actual like rationale?
Wait.
Because it seems I'm trying to drill down why you think that, and you can't give me a good answer for it other than they're just categorically different.
So you just no wait, that's interesting. You just said that xenogenders don't relate to the binary genders.
Yeah.
Are you talking to me?
The problem
is happening to my internet.
Okay, see, the problem is that I don't feel like you answered Jazz's question. So Jazz said, okay, so you're saying that they don't relate to gender, and then you said, oh, well, they're not the same as binary genders. That's not answering the question. That's answering a different question. Like,
that's my internet is being really weird. You cut out a lot. Oh, all right.
Okay, so
repeat the question.
Okay, so like Jazz asked, like, so do you think of them as genders? And you responded by saying that like they're different from binary genders. That doesn't answer the question. That's answering a completely different question.
You're right. So if his question is I do not think of them as genders, that would be that would be yes. I think of them as different methods of describing one's identity. That's how I would think of them. Like
so,
they are
valid
identities.
So how do we? So okay, no. So let's say I have actually, let's say I have non-binary, my gender identity, which is being gender apathetic, right? I have that, and I also have a xenogender. What normative process do I take it through to determine that my gender is actually that's a valid gender identity, but this one isn't? How do you determine that?
That's a good question.
Okay, well, you seem to have the answer to it because you're already making like judgments through that like framework. So I'm trying to ask you what the framework is.
We already fundamentally disagreed earlier when I said that gender inherently describes some, like, I don't want to, well, not describes, but it has a basis that stems from biological reality, right? So my position being a trans woman comes from how I identify and how I was born.
So
combination.
No, so okay, so actually, now you're referencing the paper. So actually, the idea is that it relates. No, the idea. No, I have to respond to that.
You can. Just I'm giving you a 10-minute warning that we're gonna do closing statements because I've been here for almost 2 hours.
Fantastic, fucking great. Get me out of this hell. Anyways. So the actual, as it relates to biology, I would agree with you. We kind of construct these categories through biology, right? So men like tend to exhibit these characteristics and women tend to exhibit these characteristics, right? That's the way it's linked. It's linked in no more ways than that because we can actually see that people can have a gender identity and a gender expression and a biological sex that all differ. And because of basic like logic, I don't know if you know what the law of non-contradiction is. It's the idea that two mutually exclusive things can't be both true. So someone cannot both be a man and be a woman. And because these two things can differ in such ways, we can determine there deductively these must be different things.
Right. I don't disagree with what you said, but what I would do is I would add on the understanding to the right. So like I keep using this example. A cis man cannot be a trans man. How he was born directly affects his identity. And this is how I think of gender. It is inherently sort of directly correlated with that. It can be inverse.
Okay, hold on.
There's an incongruence.
So hold up.
Wait. I'm not.
All right, buddy. I'll just write it down. We can respond to that then.
There can be an incongruence, but inherently, gender as a concept either describes your identity in relation to your biology.
So gender, what we'd have is gender. The only thing that kind of fits the description is gender expression, a conforming or non-conforming gender expression. That's what, if you actually read the document that you said you like kind of skimmed over, which I'm not sure how thoroughly you read it, you would actually know that that's the only thing that really describes that. Yeah, so that's the only thing that would really describe that. And the only reason that we have that is whether it actually correlates to the actual, the way that we like be expected to express, right? So for example, like men tend to have shorter hair. That could be like an expression that would be in line with somebody that would actually be, what would you call it? That would be in line with expectations. That would be conforming gender expression rather than a non-conforming gender expression. But the underlying properties of that expression are still the same. You still have short hair. So what we're actually describing, under the trans umbrella is actually the idea of how the identity relates to the sex. Not the identity itself. We're not describing the identity. We're describing how the identity relates to the sex. So this isn't actually a change or alter the identity. The identity is still preserved. The identity of being like relating to more masculine, more feminine things is still preserved. It's still there regardless of the sex. These two things can be completely disconnected. And we're saying somebody's trans, we're saying the relation between these two different things are not the same. Does that make sense?
Right. I understand what you're saying, but what I'm saying is, all right, so let's think of it this way. Take any one xenogender, right? How are you going to relate them, like, in relation to sex? How do they relate?
I don't know. How does being non-binary relate to sex?
Well, that's an easy one, because it
means answer it.
You don't feel... I am. It means that you don't necessarily identify as either or, right?
Yeah, so xenogenders could mean that you don't necessarily identify as either or, but there's different types of non-binary. For example, I'm gender apathetic. Some people might be just androgynous, right? These are different types of things. But these both describe a relation to gender. Or an androgynous
that you don't have like any inherent connection to any gender, right?
Yes.
Like you don't feel don't feel like you're inherently like a man or a woman. Or
yes,
something.
That's what that means.
Wouldn't that just
but there are different.
Wouldn't that just be like non-binary, basically?
It's a form of non-binary, but some people would say that they're more so gender apathetic, or not gender apathetic. They're actually more androgynous. They have more androgynous gender. They kind of take from both being masculine and feminine. There's some. Yes, I'd agree. These are both non-binary. So would you say that almost xenogenders would be as related to being non-binary, not being associated with these two? Like, what's the distinction that we're going to be making between those two?
Okay. So then let's work with that. Let's work with that. If they fall under non-binary as well, why necessarily create new genders if they still fall under this category as well?
Well, I still fall under non-binary, just as somebody who would also describe themselves as like more androgynous would fall under non-binary. But I actually do have a more distinct subcategory because we serve some kind of benefit from communicating how we feel about our own identity to other people. So we typically tend to get more specific if we want to describe more specific things.
Okay. Right. But okay. How about this thing though?
Sure.
Let's use dear gender again.
Sure.
We'll have traits, right? We'll have different things that we identify with. Aren't those open for interpretation?
What do you mean are those open for interpretation?
So like for example, people will think of things differently and thus apply them to different things. So that leads to some kind of murkiness when you're trying to define what a gender is actually describing in relation to your identity.
Well, obviously, all words kind of do have that murkiness. For example, I could say, we even had this earlier in the conversation. Somebody said valid, and we had to ask, what do you mean by valid? Because some people have different interpretations of what the word valid mean. This doesn't actually show a flaw in xenogenders. It just shows a flaw in language that we all have.
Right, but what I'm saying is you said earlier that we get more specific when we want to convey more specifics of our identity.
Yeah, we try to.
Okay, so
right. But what I'm saying is that this doesn't necessarily accomplish that.
Well, it does though. It does though. We kind of associate. No, it kind of does though, because a lot of us will associate, for example, the word deer with like very similar concepts, right? When I say deer, you know what that means, right? So if somebody uses that, to describe their gender, then that also communicates that idea.
I disagree with that, but I don't think most people would have like an idea of what a deer gender would be. when you kind of try to make it a gender.
So here's the thing.
Yeah. Okay. So that's what.
Well, not everybody has a direct relation. Not everyone has a direct relation to being non-binary. Some people can't wrap their head around being non-binary, but I think that some people will be able to. For example, people with the same gender identity. Just because certain people can't understand that specific bit doesn't mean that we're not communicating that to at least some people.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like, of course, some people will understand something, but I just mean, like, in the whole kind of spectrum, isn't the goal? I don't know what you people's opinions are on this, but like, my kind of ideal thing would be to basically not have like the strict dichotomy of man, female, and then like non-binary. I would just like people to essentially just be people and have like their own identities that aren't inherently like connected to some kind of inherently toxic thing of you should be like this if you're born a male, or you should be like this if you're born a female.
Yeah.
Like, I would kind of like to. Is this like
Skipper,
a
go
gender
ahead.
abolitionist kind of stance?
Yeah.
Skipper. Hold on.
Okay.
Can I go after Skipper?
Yeah,
So-
actually go on.
Okay, Skipper, then Amy. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so Turbo, you were like asking like about how if like what xenogenders mean. So my understanding is that like I would say that they're a form of non-binary by definition because they're definitely not binary. They're not binary. But then I would say that like with non-binary, it's like it's still a relatively niche thing. Like people are starting to know what it means, but it's still like fairly obscure. And if you if you exist outside the binary that you're expected to be in, I feel like there's like a bunch of like very complicated ways that you could like think about that and perceive yourself because of that. And so if people like don't necessarily have the tools with literal language, then they start to go to metaphors. That's my understanding of what xenogender is. Like this sort of allegorical. Like for example, I know people have used this example before, but like a lot of people like identified as like animals like in history, like they're like so and so the lion and means they're fierce. Like people have used like allegories like this to express certain
like the wolf of
their
something,
identity.
because,
And for me, in my mind, xenogenders do that to sort of express that with gender. That's like my understanding of what it means.
Okay.
I don't get it intuitively, but that's how I logic myself into
Well,
understanding it.
you see, there's actually, I know I've talked to some people who won't even understand what non-binary is. They don't really have an understanding
really quickly,
of that.
hold on. Amy was next. Amy, please do your thing and then Bunk.
Actually, sure.
So I feel like we're just saying dear gender as like a universal idea of what xenogender is, but we're not actually using like a specific like xenogender as an example. I don't know if this person wants me to like say their name on the stream, but there was someone on Twitter that I saw recently who identified as ghost gender, and they used the metaphor with their relationship with gender as like they personally feel like that they're non-binary, but they're also male. Like they exist in both, like they're kind of both, but kind of not both. And they relate that to being a ghost or the idea of a ghost because a ghost lives in like the mortal realm and the spiritual realm at the same time, but also not at the same time, right? So that would be an example of how you can use a metaphor to describe your personal experience with gender.
Yeah, sure. So what I was going to get at is that the word non-binary, not everyone actually does understand what that means. I've had conversations with people who have no idea what that means. For example, a Cheeto, I had a recent debate with a Cheeto where he had almost no idea of what that could possibly mean. And I had to almost kind of logic his way into understanding what that is. But I feel like if I communicated non-binary to the other non-binary people, they would understand what my identity is a lot better. So that's what we're trying to get at when we're using things like metaphors, is almost trying to rope other people into that understanding, where other people with that identity would also have understood a lot easier.
Yes. However, like I think my kind of problem with this whole like new gender is it isn't inherently like the thing that you want to attribute yourself some attributes from like a deer or a helicopter. I don't know. I don't really care.
Exactly.
But like that's not my problem with it. My problem with it is that I don't want there to be like, instead of a gender binary, we have like a gender canary where we have like 1,000 things that you now have to respect. I would just like it to basically not be something you have to respect at all.
Okay, no,
because
you
we
don't have
give
to
a shit.
respect at all. I don't know what I don't know how to use neopronouns because like it doesn't pop up enough for me to learn. Like if you know someone who like has neopronouns or is xenogender, then you learn that specific thing. You don't have to learn all 1,000 things.
Yeah.
Like you learn if it becomes relevant. Like I think that.
Right, but
like,
timer's
people
not.
say,
Yeah, hold on. Finish. Go ahead.
Yeah.
But then we're doing closing statements.
Like, no, you don't, because yeah.
Okay, we're doing all right because it's almost been 2 hours. So let's start with we're doing closing statements. Let's start with Bunk. Close. Go
Yeah.
ahead, whatever you
So
want to say. Keep it
this
under,
has
like,
been
5 minutes.
this has been quite the discussion. I think Skipper has single-handedly doubled my respect for Australian people throughout this discussion. I think he's got probably the best understanding out of everybody else here of what gender actually is and the ways that xenogenders actually relate to things. It's been an interesting discourse. Hopefully, I wasn't too brash with a lot of you people. I know I can get quite heated in these discussions. Yeah, that's about it.
Thank you so much. And do you want to plug any of your stuff?
Yeah, so I'm Bunk. I stream on Twitch at /BunkBoySF. I got a YouTube channel /C/BunkBoySF. And my Twitter is at @BunkIsBased. I tweet about politics all the time. I typically discuss things from a very radical sock dem perspective. I'm an unironic radlib, and I will own that. That's it.
Based.
Awesome. Okay, Sebastian, closing statement.
Yes. It's been fun, even though I felt like it was a bit antagonistic at the start. I think it might just be because I'm not used to debate panels at all, and I think we kind of it became more comfortable as we went on.
Yeah.
So I think it was good, but of course we could go deeper into some of these topics, and it's a bit hard.
Oh God, I disconnected on accident. Haha, that's funny.
Follow me on Twitter, Sebastian on TW.
Okay, Skipper, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think that, like, these discussions are very complicated, but I think, like, again, I don't understand it intuitively, but I can logic myself into understanding it. And I think I have a live and let live mentality. I think if they're not hurting anyone, we should just let them do it. That's a different question to conceptually. Conceptually, I kind of understand it. I think there are some logistical problems, but I think we can mostly work through them. I think this was a fun panel. It got a bit heated at times. Bunk, I know I said you're being I can't remember what I said, but I said something to you at one point. I completely retract that now that you've upped your respect for Australians. You can find me on YouTube at Skipper TV. My most recent video was Pro Universe Comedy. Watch it, subscribe to my channel. You can follow me on Twitter, Skipper_TV, and yeah, shout myself up. Next person to do their closing statement.
Hell yeah, Amy, go ahead.
Hello, I am Amy. You can find me on Twitter, @AmyFlower__ on YouTube, Amy Flower. I find it really weird that Bunk said that Skipper had the best understanding of gender when he spoke less than the moderator. But you know, very epic, very cool conversation. Really like all of you. All of you, I think, are pretty based in epic, except maybe Turbo. No, I'm kidding. But you guys are cool. I'll see you guys later, I guess. Follow me on Twitter. Follow me back. I will kill you. That is a promise. See you later. Bye.
Hell yeah. Okay,
Bye.
Anna, go ahead.
Yeah, this was an interesting discussion, to be sure. I probably would have liked to talk more than I did, but you know, I think hopefully we got somewhere.
Yeah, it's because the
people
few
in
things
the
that
end,
Skipper did say, I agreed
yeah,
with.
I
Okay,
agreed
everything
with
Skipper
that
said
much,
was
really.
pretty on point.
Yeah, I'm not going to link anything. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. All right, and then Turbo, go ahead. You're the last one.
All
Closing
right.
statement.
I mean, it was fun to talk to everybody. This is my first debate thingy online.
Can tell.
It was kind of fun. Bunk, you're cool. I'll probably watch you. I did smoke a little before this, so if yeah, just a little hot. Let's do this again.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming on.
Yeah?
Thank you, Jasper.
Anytime, my dude.
moderating.
All right.
Yeah, thanks.
peace
This
out.
was better than I thought it would be.
Awesome.
Yeah?
Yeah.
All right, it was fun.
Yeah, it was fun.
Oh, he left. Oh, he's
That was
gone.
cool.
He said bye.
Yeah, like, he's
They had
actually
enough of
not
us
lying.
shit. We're too fucking annoying, dude.
Get away from this.
I know
He has less patience than Bunk does.
Okay, like
Yeah.
okay, but like on some real shit, like is my voice really that annoying?
No, I don't
It can be. It can be.
Bunk was just being really fucking
I'm sorry. I'm a blood sports debater normally. I get very I can't have chilled conversations, but when some people like get on my nerves, I kind of get like that.
You were so antagonistic, like immediately. Like, are you okay? You
I got
was
really
like,
triggered by
Like,
this.
I was not prepared for this.
were chili pepper, and like you needed to.
I was like, oh, he wants to play hardball. I was like, no.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, damn,
You were
I
kind of
couldn't-
a
I
dick
could
at some
barely
points,
get
but I'll
anything in.
completely ignore that because you were nice to me in the closing statement.
Well, I mean, I follow you on
One
Twitter because
should
I've only
respect
I've
the
only
other.
seen good Skipper takes. So I mean,
Well, I only have good takes. So
Yeah.
that tracks.
Yeah.
Everything I say is also true. Everything I say is true in base, and anyone who disagrees with me is wrong.
Yeah, that's true, except for the things that you disagree with me on.
Except for when you disagree with me.
Except for when you disagree with me. I am the arbiter of truth, actually.
You're
I
correct
just
as long as you agree with everything I say.
true.
Like about what we talked about, I thought about this while we were talking. But do you think there is a difference between there not being any genders and there being like an infinite amount of genders?
So we're just going for
I
it.
think
No.
so. I think that there are. I think the word gender is almost completely unlabelable. So like it's like saying, are there like a certain amount of identities? Well, probably there's probably an indefinite amount of identities, right? A different indefinite amount of like the ways that people could describe themselves. But I don't really think we should be labeling that with a number. That doesn't really seem to be productive in any way.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
I feel like
but
it's kind of like asking. It seems kind of like asking how many numbers are there between 1 and 2. It's like 1.5.
Well, there are
there's
infinite between 1 and 2.
Yeah,
It's
well,
like-
There are real numbers,
yeah.
non-real
If you get-
numbers,
It's
integers,
like if you get
decimals.
close enough, it doesn't matter. Like the distinction, like when it comes
Yeah.
to gender, like if it's like a very slightly different,
Mhm.
then we can just
Yeah.
put that under the same label. But it's like it's kind of a weird question to me.
I think
But
that's
my-
I think that's true, but that's because I think like when we talk about this and we include a lot of stuff into gender that isn't like I don't know want to say like traditionally gender, you know, the traditional male female spectrum.
Mhm.
I think that the idea kind of becomes meaningless of gender. Like
Yeah,
gender generally becomes everything, and it's just your identity again, and that's
Like,
fine
I'm-
and cool, but it's not really like gender anymore because
right?
yeah,
Yeah, like
I don't
that's
think
something that I want to ask too. Like, why does every identity necessary? I mean, like, this is just like a real question. Like, why does it have to be gender? Like, there are
Because it
so
relates to your
many.
gender,
Well,
and
But
it's
there are
like
so many. But there are so many
words.
words that can relate to your identity, though.
yeah,
Like,
sure.
Like,
Sure.
why?
The
Like,
thing
why
is-
is it this
Yeah.
specific? thing?
So the way that I answer
Yeah.
this is there's no real way that I could like construct a system where I could differentiate between like if somebody like says I am X or this is my identity, right? There's no real way I could differentiate between this is a gender identity and this is something else, other part of their identity, other than some kind of self-report. I can't like crack open their head and see like what relates to what, right?
Well, that depends on your definition of gender, I would say.
Yeah.
Because like my definition of like I explained it before, it's a prescriptive social role. If it's not a prescriptive social role in that society, then it wouldn't be a gender.
Well,
it's just
well,
not
what about
the-
people's identities? So like, what if?
Well,
yeah,
broader
what about
identity,
people's like?
that's an individual aspect.
No, but like, let's say somebody's gender identity is like non-binary, right? Like, is that a
So
is that a
that's-
prescriptive social role?
Well, it's
Yes.
it's specifically a rejection of the social
Yes.
roles. That's
Yes.
what a non-binary.
How is that a
like,
prescriptive
non-binary is the same
social
thing as
role?
agender. It's
that-
the rejection of prescriptive social roles. That's
Okay,
like what
well, that's
makes
no
non-binary
longer a
or, like,
prescriptive
agender
social
diversity.
role. Yeah, that's no longer a
I think it
prescriptive
can
social
also
role.
be
though.
just that you feel like you have some masculine and some feminine traits, but you don't want to characterize yourself as either one inherently.
Yeah, no, that's why I said like there's some kind of like gender androgyny, and there's also like complete
Yeah.
rejection of gender or like the
I
complete
feel like we're
apathy to
all
gender.
kind of
The way I would
masculine
kind
and feminine.
of
Mhm.
the way I would kind of differentiate between identity and gender identity would be I would say that gender identity is on this spectrum from male to female, and then somewhere in between that, if you don't feel comfortable with either of those, like in terms of what society defines them as, you would say that you're non-binary. And then your identity is basically like all the things about you. So that can be whatever you want it to. But I wouldn't necessarily call it a gender because then the term kind of becomes meaningless for me, essentially.
Sure, I didn't really pay attention to that, but sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I
Yeah,
think we
this has
kinda-
been fun,
I
but I
think we
need to head
agree
out.
on the end goal. But,
Love your
yeah.
honesty.
Yeah, all right, I'm gonna head out with Skipper. All right, see you guys around on Twitter.com. Hopefully, I won't be fighting with too many people. Hopefully, we don't get locked again. I think my Twitter should unlock in like a few hours.
Start up another shitstorm. What should it be?
Let's start another dumbass discourse. All right, what's worse, pedophilia or zoophilia? All right, let's start that discourse. Let's see where we go there.
Oh, they're both bad. Oh, they're both bad.
Pedophilia is worse. Fuck animals.
Don't fuck
Whoa,
animals,
whoa, whoa.
actually. Whoa, buddy! Oh, Vay, that was... Oh, man, that was something. That panel was... Holy shit. There were so many different points of that panel where I was legitimately like, how the hell do I convey this to a bunch of people who like are having their first debate? I also felt really bad because I really cyberbullied some of those people. I don't know if they really deserved it, but they pissed me off enough to deserve it in the moment. You know what I mean? They pissed me off enough to the point where I thought they deserved it. Oh man, that was like a 2-hour long discussion. Holy shit. Oh yeah, I love the new lights, by the way. It reflects the more pale pigmentation of my skin a lot better, because my actual light has like an orange hue to it. And the lights behind me now, I think even like Twitch should be able to distinguish between where I am and where like my lighting is a lot better now. I'm gonna take off my jacket because it's getting fucking warm in here. I think Twitch should be able to like distinguish between like where I am and where my background is better, because I now have like contrasting colors. Yeah. Oh my god, that was some shit, dude. Holy fuck. All right, let's read through some of the chat messages that I didn't really get to respond to in the moment. Lyric said, "You look like a Nazi with the new hair." Yeah. Yeah. I look the part. It's my role, you know? What do we have here? I'm losing my brain cells. These people are so dumb. Oh, dear lord. Yeah, no, I could feel that. Imagine having to fucking talk with these people. This is so AIDS. It was a very AIDS panel. Tell her off. Yeah. Prag, I'm so disappointed Prag didn't join us for that panel, dude. That was so sad. Hold up. I'm gonna pop in... Yeah, dude. Holy shit. Not all of them were really that intolerant. I think it was that one person who was, like, really, really struggling. They said, like, that's a good question when I asked them a question of how they were even, like, making this assessment. And it's kind of weird that you're making the assessment when you don't have, like, an actual way as to how you're doing that. That was very, very weird to me. Not every single part of that discussion was, like, terrible, but yeah. Hold up. We got enough people in the private VC. I'm gonna hop in the live VC. We're gonna see what we got in there. Oh shit, dude. That was... Oh boy. Oh boy. That better be...
We're live.
Mm-hmm. That better be made into a video by Creeper. I swear to God, that better be made into a video by Creeper.
The reason I didn't join is because I thought we'd just be repeating each other. You know, like we would just be like repeating each other.
Nah.
That's why I didn't join.
Bro.
Yeah, go on.
I felt like every single person on the fucking panel like disagreed with me to some extent. They all came at me at times.
No.
It was really funny.
See, you don't watch streams often. I do. Literally, especially that Turpo person. That person like just watches. I think they're a very prominent member of RGR's community. And so, like, every argument you heard from her is the argument that RGR makes, like, about trans, like, Xenogenders and that.
So that's why the arguments were shit, huh?
So,
that explains a lot. Holy shit.
Also, a lot of the other people who are opposing Xenogenders and stuff, a lot of the other talking points like came from Destiny.
Oh.
The other talking points seem to come from Destiny, yeah.
Well, all the talking points were really, really actually easy to go through. Like, I would expect, like, a lot more pushback because I was on a panel with so many different people who, like, seemed to disagree with me. Yeah. But it seemed like nobody could actually come out. I think the one actual argument they had is, you're being mean, which was really, really funny.
Are you aware, like, Amy Flowers, I think on Twitter was, like, making out you're, like, an asshole or something.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, sure. Yeah, no, I will own that, okay? This is that one Destiny clip is like, you're a bad person. Yes, I try to be. I am the worst person, in fact. It's my goal. I wake up every single day and like, how could I be a shitty person today? How could I be worse than I was yesterday, you know?
You did dominate that panel. I mean, I'm watching that, and I think that video and that panel, a lot of people are talking about on Twitter. I think you have made a name for yourself through that debate.
Dude, that was fucking... Oh my god, that was fucking crazy.
So, how will you feel if this is the debate that makes you big?
That I'd be happy with it because I was just as much of an asshole as I ever am. Like, I feel like I represented myself pretty good with some of those insults.
Yeah, I feel like so. Literally, that biological element to gender that Turpo makes is literally the RGR argument about like gender. That the reason we cannot accept like Xenogenders and that being valid is literally because there's a biological element to like that stuff.
Well, I literally, I think I rebutted that pretty well. That they like almost like I gave them like there's a test where it's like 99% possible. Do we go with the test or do we go with like the self-report? And they're like, well, we go with the self-report. So then like, why can't we go with the self-report in all situations? Then as it relates to gender, how do we like distinguish between like normal identity and like gender identity? identity without self-report. They couldn't seem to give me an actual good answer for that. I think that's where they took like a massive fucking L in that conversation, dude.
I think it's really good that you went in a philosophy route, because I think what Riley would try to do is throw like 30 different studies at you that like say that there may be a biological element to gender.
Well, I mean, there might be. I'd argue that, like, almost everything, if we were omniscient, right, and you could, like, understand every single thing, right, we could understand every single thing from science, I think you might be able to actually determine that. But I think that no matter how accurate we get with that, self-report will always be better. It'll always be better unless we have a 100% chance of determining that. I don't think we ever will.
How close do you think the biological element argument comes to, like, transmedicalism? Like, how close do you think it is?
I literally said they were getting dangerously close to transmedicalism. I think that if you take it to its actual, like, conclusion, it is transmedicalism 99% of the time.
Because
yeah,
it's just really weird because Riley has, like, I think a 1-minute video where she literally argues the reason we accept trans people as being valid is because of, like, a biological element.
Well, what if we didn't have any research to it? Should we still accept trans people as being valid? I would say yes. Like, if people are, like, fucking killing themselves, totally. I think, like, we should accept them. Yeah, totally. I mean, Flowers asking to join VC. Sure. Give them a rule. Shit, yeah. I don't know. Did they make me out to be like an asshole on Twitter or some shit?
They're just like, Bunk, what a guy.
What a guy.
In a very, like, I think, sarcastic way.
Well, actually, I'm sorry, my penis is just too fucking big for the panel. Look, okay, if you're not really retarded, I'm very nice to people, okay? When they don't say complete retarded shit and come at me, I'm generally pretty nice.
I think it's really good you're doing this because generally it's been a very minority of, like, us, like, leftoids, I guess, like, arguing that Riley's arguments could literally lead to, like, people not accepting trans people. And, like, they will say that that's ridiculous, so I'm really happy, like, you really rebutted that to a
well, I completely own them at that point. It was like, okay, well, now what you're arguing for is like, why can't we just like change our gender? And I feel like bad because that's like almost the Hans argument, but that's the argument I'm pushed into, right? And I'd argue for like an alternative, like rebuttal to that. But like, if you believe this, then that it literally you run into transphobia if you do believe that is the case. You know what I mean?
It also seems like people like Turpo, like I am the superior trans people, and these Xenogender. You know, it feels very much like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Most of the people, like, I don't know who's the guy's name, Sebastian something. My God, he was like mauling. He's like, oh my God, you're being so mean. Stop. Like, well, exaggerating a bit, but like, my God, it's like.
Well, I will admit I was a little bit of an asshole at points. I feel like every single time I was validated in doing so because someone said something really fucking dumb. Okay. Holy shit, that was a conversation and a half. Holy fuck, man.
I don't actually, yeah, you blown the fuck out everyone. I'm like, Jesus. I thought it was gonna be a bit hard. I don't know, people. I thought maybe they had kind of like very strong arguments and shit. I'm like, okay.
Did I get banned from Twitch?
Did you get banned from Twitch?
I think I got banned from Twitch.
What happened?
Did you get banned from Twitch?
I did.
Faggot. You told people to kill yourself. What a dumbass. Stupid ass.
This is so bad.
I keep on telling you. I keep on telling you.
No. Okay.
Did I get banned from Twitch?
You're not banned. You're not banned. Let me just check. Maybe it's your internet.
Sorry, unless you've timed the sheet.
That's so. Oh man.
What the fuck?
What? Did you get banned from Twitch?
I think I did.
Is it perm?
It might be. Oh, temporarily suspended. Hateful slurs and symbols. It occurred on this VOD. We're suspended from Twitch for 7 days.
Wait, Bunk.
Wait, please send me.
Wait, no, wait.
Yeah?
My goodness, you people. I think it may have been one of the people who you're on the panel with. I think they may have reported you. I just have this feeling.
That's
it's very weird.
Dear.
It's very weird, Bunk. Isn't it a little bit weird that the day you get temporarily suspended is the day you went on a panel? Isn't that a little bit weird?
It is. Okay. I got banned from Twitch. I just got banned from Twitch. Yeah, I literally can't find your Twitch. Was so confused. Yeah, I got banned. I just got banned from Twitch, guys. I literally just got banned from Twitch.
I mean, do you regularly call people faggots and kill themselves on Twitch?
Yes. Don't try to lie, Bunk. Okay. Yes.
Ah, my! Are you kidding me?
Okay, so
I was like breaking TOS, and you're like, "No, it's okay. I think TOS is okay." You got banned.
Well, it's not been broken, really, though, is it?
Wait, is there any specific like does it
Are you
No.
kidding
Kinda
me?
like,
Are
a lot
you
of the time it
kidding?
doesn't.
Oh man.
Fuck Bunk. Tired of that dumbass loser. Crying in his bedroom while I'm cruising in my cruiser. This dumbass bitch, thinking that he's cool while streaming on Twitch. Call this Vietnam, we're gonna get you on a weight loss program. Everyone knows, you will never be a pro. Well, I'm part of my rap game. Always tripping out, never no problems with burnout. The vids keep coming, so does the drama. Clearing your notepad, your tweets aging with a granddad. Capital of chat, doing flips. Everyone in the chat, Bunk